Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to Project Services Operations Committee for today, Tuesday the 18th of June. Welcome to staff, my elected members, to members of the public that are here, the media and those that are listening on YouTube. So please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the video is publicly available on Council's YouTube channel. Elected members and speakers, please remember to speak clearly into your microphone and only one person at a time so it can be heard on YouTube, and also to make it easier for our committee advisor to take minutes. Everybody please ensure that their phones are all turned to vibrate or turned off and all devices are on silent. Councillor Granger. Okay, so we will move into the first item, which is, apologies first. We have a full house, so there are no apologies. We'll move into the public forum. And this morning, our first speaker, we do have two speakers this morning, councillors. We have a last minute addition to our public forum, but first up, we have Sally Cook from Main Street Tauranga talking on an activation of vacant spaces initiative. So Sally, we welcome you to the microphone. And we have a presentation. And Sally, you have 10 minutes and we will have questions at the end of that. Welcome Sally, and to Millie.
Good morning everybody, thank you very much for your time today. We're here to talk to you about Activate Vacant Spaces, turning vacant spaces I should say, into vibrant spaces for community engagement. This is a Main Street Downtown Tauranga initiative. First and foremost, we obviously want to acknowledge we absolutely are passionate champions and celebrators of the transformational growth and developments in our city centre as they happen as we speak and continue to happen over the following years. What we also must acknowledge though right now is we have some immediate and pressing challenges in our city centre, and this is where this initiative has come from. We have over 150 vacant spaces in our city centre. We have a decrease in foot traffic numbers. We do have a perception of reduced offerings. We have, some would say, a lack of vibrancy for existing businesses and transformational disruption to access. So we think there's an opportunity aligned with the Tauranga City Council response plan to meet one of Council's core identified community outcomes of a city of great spaces, places and environments. So that's why we want to talk to you about the Activate Vacant Spaces program. What is it? It basically, in a nutshell, matches property owners with individuals who have creative ideas for temporary projects. It turns vacant spaces into vibrant spaces. It's based on a proven successful model and models running in other centres across New Zealand. It offers art and culture to pop-up retail shops, workshop spaces, bless you, entertainment spaces and community engagement spaces. It's a collaborative model that optimises the respective functions of the partnership stakeholders. It will build institutional knowledge and leverage opportunities for maximising spaces in the city centre. It is proposed as a PPP model for sustainability and active engagement across our stakeholder network. It will have clear and accountable KPIs and measures for success built in. We're proposing a pilot 12-month project, and we believe it's a unique model that no one else could deliver. So Activate Vacant Spaces could see the likes of art installations, and will see art installations, cultural displays, community group installations, music performances, theatre workshops, window displays and even retail pop-up trial shops. We'll source these displays, installations and activations from across the community, from the likes of Creative Bay of Plenty, Incubator, BOP Film, Mawao Performing Arts, Te Aonga Tauranga, art societies, theatrical groups, photographic societies, Toi Oho Mai and the University of Waikato, schools, historic village, cultural groups, community groups, and a wealth of other options. So how does it work? We establish a registry of vacant spaces with property owners across the city centre. We then match those with installations, activations and displays. We establish a robust platform and maintain a high level of integrity so that what you see in those spaces is quality. We'll run a program of monthly calendar of installations and activations under the Activate Vacant Spaces banner so that it's really easy and efficient to market through our stakeholder network and to the public. They'll know to come in and have a look for that brand and see what they find in store. And we'll work in collaborative partnership with Relevant organisations, including Creative Bay of Plenty, Tauranga Chamber of Commerce, hopefully Venture Centre, stakeholders and community groups across the Bay of Plenty to identify and attract the art and culture installations and activations and potential retail test sites. We believe it will be of benefit to the property owners for a start off and businesses because it'll increase the public profile of those vacant spaces and allow people to visualise how they could be full-time tenanted. It will allow the property owners to tangibly contribute to art and cultural offerings in the city centre. It provides a unique platform for property owners to nurture that sector as well and create a low-risk, low-cost way for entrepreneurial test site, pop-up, start-up retail spaces in their properties. It could create potential employment opportunities if we do get the success of other models across the country with full-time tenancies. We have the potential to contribute to foot traffic and to add to the diversity of art and culture in our city centre and build a stronger sense of community and belonging. And we will mitigate the current image of an emptying city centre on some levels. We believe this initiative also directly aligns to the Tauranga City Council response plan. In the plan, you state that activation requires proactive and sustained collaboration between transformation partners. The Activate Vacant Spaces initiative will deliver that. In the plan, you also state that it's about keeping the city centre vibrant and attractive with new events and activities that improve people's experience in the city centre. Again, our initiative can contribute to that. And you state that the purpose of activation is to support existing businesses and retail, which also, of course, aligns with Main Street Tauranga, which is why we wish to lead this initiative. We have obviously already had some discussions with stakeholders. We've had some great discussions with Creative Bay of Plenty who support the initiative, obviously want to have further talks with us as we develop all aspects of it. It is still in its development phase, well progressed, but I'm certainly not presenting to you today with the full program set to launch tomorrow. The window display portion of the program is supported by Creative Bay of Plenty to showcase community art and culture. It will indeed, as mentioned earlier, see a solid community partnership with Main Street Tauranga working across the stakeholder network with the likes of Creative Bay of Plenty, Incubator, Tourism Bay of Plenty, Chamber of Commerce, Venture Centre, Priority One, Mawao Performing Arts, BOP Film, Te Aonanga Tauranga, Historic Village, cultural and community groups, and the list goes on. We didn't dream this up ourselves. We're not that clever sometimes, but we do believe in taking existing proven successful models. We looked across the country. There are quite a few, as you will know. There's everything from the About Space in Hutt City to Life in Vacant Spaces and Gap Filler in Christchurch and Dream Brokerage in several cities. The About Space model is the one that we are best aligned with and have taken and bespoked to Tauranga, and they've got some amazing stats that I think are worthy of attention. In the first 4 years, they delivered 68 projects across 38 properties. 16 are now fully tenanted, and they attracted more than 22,000 people to their About Space project in the first couple of years. Impressive stats, and stats I think that give us validity to look to their program for the best fit for purpose, and they've been really helpful in our discussions. So the Activate Vacant Spaces program, we also have some clear targets set around it. We would like to canvass 100% of the property owners in the city centre to build the registry and get a strong uptake on that. That will be one of the KPIs of success. We hope to deliver, or dream and plan and target to deliver, I should say, a minimum of 3 installations per month within the first 6 months of the pilot, up to 5 within the first 12 months of the pilot project. This aligns with what Hutt City achieved, and so we know it is realistic. We will set KPIs that sit alongside a reduction, hopefully, in vacant tenancies in the city centre. If the program is successful, we should see that. We'll achieve our targets on the registry and the programs delivered in meeting our KPIs. The quality of the program and community participation will all be also woven into the KPIs. Additional outcomes I think we can strive to achieve will be building that solid institutional knowledge to develop an accurate and current register of available tenancies, potential tenants and active installations, and that will give us a really unique perspective across the city centre as well for quite an objective view. And of course the development of a structured and facilitated program for nurturing talent and business development. We would like to get underway as soon as possible. There is a number of events coming up that we could align with, and our installations, activations and displays could support that. There's the Groundswell Festival of Innovation in August, Māori Language Week and Conservation Week in September, Mental Health Awareness Week in October, Volunteers Week, which is actually now, so this time next year, and other events like the Jazz Festival, Tauranga Arts Festival, Tarnished Frocks and Divas, One Love, Tin Man and many more. There are events that are happening across the city as well that we could aim to theme some of our installations, displays and activations alongside, which would get a really nice cohesive look across the city as well. Ideally, we'd like to seek Tauranga City Council Foundation partnership funding from you and a commitment today that would allow us to move forward. Then we would look at aligning up, along with the PPP model, some stakeholder and corporate funding, seek a coordinator to run the program with us, similar to other centres, build the registry and get the program underway. The structure we're proposing is governance, management and implementation by Main Street Tauranga. Delivery of the arts, culture displays, installations and activations will also be something that sits under our responsibility, but very much we seek support for that from Creative Bay of Plenty and other stakeholders in the art and culture sector. The retail pop-ups and startups, again led by Main Street of course, but in collaboration with the likes of Chamber of Commerce. We've already had discussions with Matt, the new Chief Executive, who supports the principle of the initiative and wishes to have further discussions, and we'd obviously like to broaden those discussions out to Venture Centre and the likes and other stakeholders. The model we propose is a PPP. We would seek today a commitment to foundation funding from Tauranga City Council. We already have pro bono Property Council investment to look at some of the legal paperwork around the proposal. And then, of course, Main Street Tauranga and other stakeholders we hope to bring into the mix to assist. In other cities, to finish, the model is fully funded by council. We're not coming here today to ask you to fully fund, but we are asking you to line up with a PPP model. We would ask that if we could get a commitment for foundation funding from TCC, that would allow us to then go out to the stakeholders and corporate sector to seek the additional funding for a pilot 12-month program. The potential cost of the program, which I gather is your main question, just to complete my presentation. Based on the model of Hutt City and others across the country, we believe a pilot program, and I say again, we're still putting the full budget together, it's looking around $150,000 to $180,000.
Thank you, Sally. And as elected members know, we can't make too many decisions, but we can give direction to staff. So we'll have some discussion around that. First, we have Councillor Malloy, then Councillor Stewart.
Yes, through the chair, if I may, I do have a proposal, but I wondered if I left it till after the questions, or I can make the proposal now, but I would like the opportunity to make that proposal.
Would you like to speak briefly to it, just to set the scene?
Oh, yeah, okay, I will. I would like, I wondered if we could have a straw poll that would support staff to come back to council with a plan to support the activation of vacant spaces. So we could have a straw poll amongst councillors to see whether there's support there for that.
Thank you. We'll have some discussion, then we'll look at the straw poll. Next, we have Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Clout.
Through the chair to Sally, thank you for that. Two questions. One is, why didn't you perhaps bring this to the annual plan when we were doing our budget processes?
Due to the volume of work that Main Street Tauranga undertakes, we had not developed the program fully until from the beginning of this year. We've been working on the program. We don't believe in coming to seek funding until we have it well shaped. So it's only been in the last 3 to 4 months that we've actually put the full scope of the program together, because we've been talking with Hutt City and with the team in Christchurch and other places across New Zealand. So we wanted to do a full briefing and scoping so that when we did come to you, we had all our ducks in a row.
And secondly, the organisations you mentioned are ones that council funds to a certain extent. So have you had any early conversations with those people to see if there's some, funding that can be arranged between the different organisations that you mentioned that council funds in different ways, such as you know, the incubator, P1, etc.?
We have
Yourselves?
we have initially socialised the concept with stakeholders across the network to see if the concept was validated in its initial form, which we have received from a number of stakeholders. Because the model is funded by councils across the country, we felt the most pragmatic course forward was to come first to council and seek foundation funding to some degree, that we could then go with a surety to those stakeholders and community groups and say, we already have Tauranga City Council as a foundation funding partner, now will you join us in that move forward?
Councillor Clout, then Councillor Baldock.
Thank you very much, Sally and Millie. Two questions. First of all, when these activations are in place, do the property owners receive any sort of rental, or is it just free space for them?
Free space for the property owners is how the model runs in other centres across the country.
Thank you. Second question, there were 150, you said, empty spaces?
Approximately.
Approximately. How many of those are earthquake-prone buildings which the landowners or the property owners need to upgrade?
And that's a really good question, and that is something that we right today do not have exactly those details. So in building the registry, it's understood, our view is that we will find that of those spaces available, a number will be not available because of earthquake strengthening. There will be property owners who simply don't want to take part in the program. So we still need to validate that, because some property owners have a different view of what they do or don't want happening in their spaces. So the registry will actually give us a really robust registry of property owners who are actively wishing to join the program, the vacant spaces available today, tomorrow, next month, next year.
Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Sally. Sounds very exciting. The 150,000, is that an annual, or is it, because you mentioned about a 6-month trial there, so how long a period of time will that cover?
That was a 12-month trial, and that budget at this stage is based on what Hut City and others have done across the country, because they budget per installation. So if we achieved our targets of 5 installations a month across a 12-month pilot program, we are looking at approximately $150,000 of costings, or $160,000 to run it. We're not asking council for that full amount.
And is it possible that some of the collections in our collection would be able to be displayed as part of the museum trust? We're trying to work on that sort of thing. Is that part of what could happen to?
Absolutely. I mean, I think diversity of art and culture offerings is what we're trying to achieve. We're, end user focused. We want vibrancy in the city centre, and so I think the exciting thing about what other cities have done and what we would love to do here is have vacant spaces that could have anything from artefacts to art displays to, theatre to workshops to, the range of offerings I think is immense across a range of community organisations.
Councillor Granger.
Thanks, Sally. Can you just give us a little bit more on the response from the owners in general? Are they all happy with what you're intending to do? Are we looking at 50%, 75%? I just want a bit of an idea.
We have not been to the property owners yet, so this is us asking for support to get this initiative underway. To go to the property owners is to get them all on board on a structured program like this will take time and resourcing, because some of those property owners, I know for a fact, one of them is, don't quote me on this, but I think he's in his 80s, doesn't do phone or email. We need to sit down with him, have a cup of tea and have a discussion. So to get around all the property owners in the city to introduce them to this concept and see that it's a proven model across New Zealand that works really well will take time. So building the registry is actually a core part of the program. So we don't know at this stage. That's why I was saying building the registry, one of the KPIs should be that we get a good percentage of property owners actually signed up.
Seems like the cart before the horse in my mind. Wouldn't it be best to go and see them first and just have a talk with them in general?
We simply don't have the time or resourcing to do that, because all the initiatives we're currently running, Millie is our Main Street coordinator, already works, day in, day out. So it takes a lot of time, because every property owner has different needs, different requirements and a different perspective.
Councillor Robson.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. So when you say you socialise it with stakeholders, perhaps the key stakeholder group, which is the property owners, it hasn't been socialised with them yet effectively. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Okay, so interesting. You talk about a target of 5 properties a month. In the hut, they manage 38 properties over 4 years, 68 projects in total. 38 properties over 4 years is about 10 a year, effectively. I don't know whether those things were done all the way through. Is 5 a month? You started off saying
That
3 and
68
then 5 a month.
68
Is that a bit
projects.
ambitious? I'm trying to be realistic. Because
Absolutely. Hutt City had the similar target, which is why we said in the first 6 months we would probably only aim to get 3, because Hutt City had a similar target of 5 projects a month. They had 68 in the first 4 years. And they, obviously, it takes longer than you think sometimes to get these initiatives underway and to get the calibre of what you require. So we need to set realistic targets around those. Yes.
I suppose I'm a little bit concerned that you're setting yourself up to fail potentially with that level of target, 5 a month. You know, following out, if you rolled it out in 3 years on that basis, you're talking activating 180 or have 180 activations, which is sort of 3 times what they got in Hutt. Yeah, and you're working on putting together more. Do you need help putting together a budget or a business case for this? Because it sounds like you have no resource. And I suppose I'd find it difficult to support something without some sort of, you know, budget sitting in front of me to show me where the money's going.
Absolutely.
And what the KPIs are. So is it possible to stage this in the sense that you get help from wherever, council, me personally, pro bono, whatever, we put together the business case, we see how that stacks, and then you have something to bring to council? Is that a possible step, or could you get help from P1 because they know how to count?
We have the basic. We do know how to count. We have the basis of a budget together based on models from other cities, and we have a basis of a budget. We're here today, we were asked to come here today to socialise it with you, and I absolutely said from the get-go, we are not fully scoped at this point, but we are working with partners to do that, and we have the resources and the intelligence internally to actually do that. But we're also working in collaboration already with Chamber of Commerce. We have discussed it with the likes of Priority One, so we do like to do things really robustly, Councillor Robson, so we would actually do that. Any request we've come to you today with was on the caveat of we would welcome a commitment to supporting the program, with the caveat that we had a solid budget, business plan and KPIs in place that were realistic and road tested.
Thank you, Councillor Mason.
Thanks. So all we're doing at the moment is just potentially, it sounds like there's a lot of potential to it. We obviously need a lot more facts and figures, you know, otherwise but if our staff work with Main Street to develop those facts and figures and come back with a proposal, that's all we're looking at the moment, I guess.
I'll direct a question to Paul Davidson. Paul, so we will take a straw poll, but do you, from this discussion, have a good understanding of what the project is, what councillors potentially want to achieve, and is it possible to bring something back to us for the 27th of June council meeting?
Through the chair, obviously given the timing in the process, to include it in the annual plan will be difficult at this point in time. What I would suggest is that we bring an option back in the annual plan resolution. It would look to, just based on this conversation, look to see how we could actually fund that throughout the year and bring that back, and there'd be options around what rate it's funded from, whether it be general economic development, etc. And some options in the event that funding wasn't able to be targeted from those sources, what other options we could use throughout the year to fund it. So that would be the suggestion.
You'd also hopefully include like the PPP partnership and other stakeholder funding that Main Street have talked about. Thank you, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through the chair, I understand that we have a budget to do with while the redevelopment of the CBD's going on. I'd like to know what our budget is and how it's being spent at the moment, please. Doesn't have to be at this meeting if the information's not available, but I'd like to understand how much is already in our budget for CBD, communication, etc. I know there is some budget.
Mayor Brownless.
If I can just suggest, we don't need straw polls or anything, we just need a paper with a proposal. We don't have to vote on that. I think that would be good. As soon as you can bring it to us, the better, but let's use the time to get it right. So we need our people to work with Main Street and other interested parties, put together a proposal, bring it to us, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Was directed to take straw polls so we could give strong indication to staff, but I think through the conversation there is an appetite for that, so we can continue on with that. Any further questions for Downtown Tauranga? No. Okay, Councillor Malloy.
If I may, I'd just like to point out that $150,000 compared to the loss of money flowing around our CBD economy with 150 empty spaces is peanuts, and we should be doing everything we can to support the businesses in the CBD, to get that foot count back up, get that vibrancy back up, and I think this is a wonderful proposal. And it's funny how great minds think alike, because Councillor Mason has been talking about this for some time, so I think we should absolutely support it.
Councillor, last question, Councillor Robson.
Yeah, it's a question to the chair really about process here. It seems to me, do we need a motion to give staff some clear direction? And if so, should that motion be directive? The suggestion of a possible motion from Councillor Malloy sort of gave staff a clear steer on sort of, if you like, the outcome that was being requested. And I suppose I'm a bit more neutral. I'd like to see just a quality, balanced report sitting in front of me that gives me some basis for making a defensible decision. We've been in the situation, not so much in the recent past, in the very recent past, where decisions have been made that have resulted in us not doing this pre-work properly. This is this pre-launch phase stuff that we failed to do repeatedly. And it didn't help. It didn't help relationships. It didn't help anything. And it sort of tarnished an initiative that some people are very positive about. Obviously, I'm talking in this case about Our Place. So I just like us taking the learnings from the Our Place experience to not do the same thing to Main Street and Tuscany, or whoever's running this. I don't want us to prejudice this by not doing the proper pre-work. And as for the comment that $150,000 is peanuts, I'd like to see that on an election sign in the next few months.
Through the chair, I said it was peanuts compared to what is lost.
Thank you for clarifying, Councillor Malloy. I think that staff have, through the conversation, staff do understand what it is that we want to achieve. This is not our project. It's very early stages. It's a proven model. It's measurable. It's going to have KPIs around it. It's going to be multi-stakeholder. They've got the support from Priority 1. So I believe staff have enough information to bring back an issues and options paper to the 27th of June when councillors will make a decision. So thank you very much, Downtown Tauranga.
Thank you.
Clarification from the chair, you put a deadline on that. Is there sufficient time to actually do the necessary work? And where I'm thinking about there is some indication of the socialisation with what I believe are the key stakeholders, which is the property owners. That's a very short time period for something to be delivered to us, actually hit our agenda briefing at, what are we talking, 2 weeks? Can we turn this around in this time?
Question has already been addressed to Paul Davidson, who has answered it.
Sorry, clarification. Paul Davidson said he could give us information on funding. This is not about where can we find $150,000. This is about how does this project work? What does it involve? What's the resourcing? Where does the $150,000 go? What are the KPIs? My question is, can that report be delivered in time for the agenda for the 27th of June? That's my question.
Just sorry, through the chair, just to clarify on the funding, Councillor Robson's correct in terms of the annual plan conversation and not putting additional money into the annual plan, but we will look to fund through that. In terms of the timing of the report, it doesn't need to be linked to that funding if council choose otherwise.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so we will move on. We do have another speaker in the public forum today. Sean Kelly is going to be speaking on behalf of the Marine Precinct tenants. So Paul, if you would like to come up, you have 10 minutes, which will include your time to address councillors and questions at the end.
Is that going? Righto, cool. So I'm here to speak to you guys today about some concerns that we have about the Marine Precinct. So there are currently, other than TCC, there are now currently 4 other landowners who've bought lots at the Marine Precinct. So we're all represented here today. We've got Roger and Don, and we've got Regan from Super Yacht Coatings, and we've got an apology from Jim McManaway from SMF. Anyway, for some time we have been getting feedback from customers of the Marine Precinct that they are very, very unhappy. And in lots of cases, people have been encouraged to bring their boats here to Tauranga to the facility. But whilst they've been here, they've been treated poorly and they've gone away very unhappy. And I've got some letters from some of those people here to read to you today. Anyway, our businesses are all family businesses that have invested in the Marine Precinct, and we all are going to make money for our employees and our families from servicing boats at the Marine Precinct. I also want to state we're all very, very grateful that we've got this far. Please don't think that we're ungrateful for where we've got to. But we're worried. And anyway, so right now, between the 4 businesses involved, we have a total of 64 full-time employees. And when settlement occurs with Pashao Boat Builders, that number's going to increase by, I'm guessing, probably another 25. So our reputation at the moment, which we believe is being damaged, and I'm going to explain why. In some cases, so I'm going to read you, we've asked everybody who has expressed their unhappiness, we've asked them to write to us so that we can report to you guys. In one case, that person was still so angry, he said, I just can't even deal with this. This is Tauranga local, actually. I can't even deal with it. I don't want to know about it. I just want to forget about the experience. I'm going to read you these ones. In one case, I've got exactly 3 here. In one case, it involves 2 letters. This is from a fishing company who has since boycotted the Marine Precinct and has taken their next vessel to Whangarei to have work done to it because of what happened to them here. During the launching process, the Vessel Works travel lift for which the J. Patricia was being launched sustained a direct collision impact whilst being supervised and operated by your Vessel Works nominated operator. That damage will result in the J. Patricia from sustaining further financial loss for the refurbishment and rehabilitation of the existing mast works yet to be carried out in accordance with marine engineering requirements. Owners of the vessel were not responsible for the launching of the J. Patricia, as that responsibility rested with the operators of the travel lift. Through the actions of Vessel Works, the owners of the J. Patricia are exposed to financial loss and believe that Vessel Works as operator has not provided their services with all reasonable care. This is for the same operator. Another incident. During the launching process, a strop was taken into the propeller, became entangled, leading to the bending of the propeller blades and the engine stalling. That damage has now restricted the vessel from returning to sea and will result in costs and losses to owners to assess and carry out repairs of that damage. Owners of the vessel were not responsible for the launching of the J. Patricia, as that responsibility rested with the operators of the travel lift Vessel Works. Through the actions of Vessel Works, the owners of the J. Patricia are exposed to financial loss and believe that Vessel Works as an operator has not provided their services with all reasonable care. Those are 2 paragraphs extracted from those letters. There is more. Now, this is from a fisherman from Whakatane who brought his boat to Vessel Works and left extremely unhappy, angry, swearing, says he's never coming back. The finger berths are riddled with decaying vessels that are taking up berthage, e.g. Chatham Explorer, which I believe will sink in its current berth. That's actually quite a serious issue, that one. That's really needs to be looked at. Anyway, and the concrete ex-Navy barge that otherwise could be used by active commercial vessels and benefiting local contractors. This has been brought up before but falls on deaf ears. The excuse being that they are a source of income, but again, taking berths of active vessels and reducing the options for fishers and other people needing berthage. As with the new travel lift facility for vessels, it is run like a sterile medical facility and not an operating boatyard. At all times, you are watched and criticised for any falling debris onto the ground, made to feel very uncomfortable working on our vessel, to the point that we will be considering taking my vessel to Dockland 5 in Whangarei, where we are made to feel welcome. I will come back to that point about being criticised while working in the yard. This one is from a super yacht, a small one that was brought here, and I spent a lot of money being repainted and refitted, etc. And he writes, it would be my pleasure to outline our recent 4-month haul-out period at Vessel Works Tauranga. On the whole, we had a great experience in Tauranga and achieved all our goals, and more thanks to your company and other local contractors. Tauranga and the Mount hold plenty of opportunity for the crew, great beaches for surfing, hiking and sightseeing, while in the area all proved attractive options for the crew in their downtime. At this stage, I would say there are a few holes that need improving within the yard's management itself, and I'm sure with proper direction and management this will be improved. Yard improvements. Haul out proved more stressful than needed due to the slings being positioned in the wrong location for our lift, even after many detailed drawings, photos, and a meeting prior to the haul of exactly where they needed to sit. The lift operator added centre slings that covered the stabiliser fins. It wasn't until I told him not to lift the vessel, as he was intending, or he would have damaged the stabiliser fins. Another strange decision by the yard was to lay plastic coverings under the vessel. This creates a safety issue, as the plastic causes a trip hazard and holds water instead of allowing it to drain away. I have never seen this used for the whole duration of a yard period in any other yard, except perhaps when applying the anti-foul. Garnet blasting of commercial vessels was poorly contained due to lack of tenting, leaving garnet covering the ground and blowing and flowing away with the weather, also creating a hazard as there wasn't sufficient walking room around the vessel site to the office and bathrooms due to positioning of the vessel right up against the office building. So anyway, those are only a small few. Those are only a small few of the of references that we've been able to gain from some of the unhappy people. And I would actually go as far to say as considerably more than half of the people that are leaving this facility are feeling treated poorly.
So Sean, would you just like to wrap up now because we're out of time? Thank you.
Sorry, here's an example of a book that I had to put on our workshop bench for our staff to come and write in order to calm down after they've been spoken to for whatever activity they were carrying out. But anyway, we also have, one of the things that we're here to say to you is we are invested parties, consider ourselves stakeholders. We are concerned about the reputation that is that the Marine Precinct is becoming, and we want to help the Tauranga City Council arrive at a sensible solution in order to deal with these matters. Our suggestion is that we form a stakeholder group for which the Tauranga City Council is a stakeholder and part of, to regularly consider the management of it and its performance.
Thank you, Sean. Are there any questions from any of the councillors? Okay, Paul, would you like to speak to where you're at in that report that you have?
The Chair. As people would be aware, Max Patterson has been having a look and speaking to people at the Marine Precinct. That report isn't complete yet. In terms of, we've said that around the end of the month is that will be available. I guess the first question would be to confirm that that Max has seen those letters and has had conversations with those people would be question one within there. What I can say in terms of your last comment, Mr. Kelly, is just that one of the conversations I've had with Max is about that stakeholder group. So that is one thing that will be looked at as part of that report when we finalise it. So, but that is due around the end of the month.
Thank you. And Sean, if you'd be happy to, we can take copies of those letters and distribute them to the councillors. If you'd be happy to give them to Robin at the back, and she will provide them to us. But if there's no further questions, are you happy for those letters to be online, Sean? Are you happy for those letters to be online?
Yes, in one case, in all cases I explained that that's what would happen, they would be public record, and in one of them I've crossed out some bits that they didn't want. There's also other stuff there as well that one of them's carried on about which he wants the council to see. So, no problem.
Thank you. Robin can take care of that. Councillor Robson, do you have a question?
Yeah, just to give Sean, good to see you again, some reassurance with regard to the work that Max Peterson's doing. Is it possible to make the brief to Max Peterson, which I assume is in writing somewhere, public? Because I think you'd need to know, if we're going to wait for a report from someone, that it's actually going to address some of the issues you've raised. We don't want to be in a situation of a report coming that doesn't meet expectations or doesn't address issues that have been publicly aired. So is it possible to make the brief public? Or let me put that another way. Is there any reason why the brief shouldn't be made public?
Yes, it can be made public. In very broad terms, we in recent months have been receiving complaints and concerns about the operation of the Marine Precinct, and as a result of that we commissioned Mr. Peterson to meet with and speak to a range of different users, tenants and stakeholders down there, and he's just at the tail end of that process now, and much of what we've heard today I imagine would have been expressed to Max, and so we look forward to that report, and once we get, I think, some validation or otherwise and start to understand fully what's going on down there, we'll be able to take some action.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you, Sean and Regan, for presenting this morning in public forum. So we'll move through now into our agenda items. The first is the Chairperson's report. So just through the Chairperson's report, there is none, but I'd like to welcome Emily Gudsill to the committee today as our tangata whenua representative for Project Services Operations. So welcome, Emily. You're not a stranger to us, and we look forward to your contribution through the course of all our meetings. Also like to welcome Susan Jameson, her first Project Services and Operations Committee. Susan is the new General Manager of People and Capability. So we'll move on. Acceptance of late items, there is none. Confidential business to be transferred into the open. There is no confidential agenda today. We'll have no change of order of business, not required. We'll move through the agenda as scheduled. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest from any of the councillors or from members of the committee? That will be none. Okay, so moving on, the first item is the DC 167 Coolum Park redevelopment. I bring councillors' attention to the large number of appendixes that are attached to this. Please ensure that you note the date of all of those reports and the order that they're presented. The first being Bairi Makari's report from February 2018. and through the open days of April 2018 through to February 2019, and the changes that have occurred through those reports. So just bear in mind the dates of those projects and those papers that are presented to us. So we have Mark Smith and Doug Spittle presenting to this report. Thank you, Mark. Over to you.
Good morning. Culin Park. Culin Park is a fantastic site in a premier location on our harbour. It functions as a destination for locals and citywide residents alike. The activities that take place there are passive recreation, including play, beach activities, picnics, and we've got the boat club there as well. People travel there by foot, car and bicycles. There is indeed a commuter cycle route through the reserve, getting people from Matua Peninsula into the city off of the roads. During the 16-17 annual plan, Council resolved to bring forward the budget by 3 years to implement the improvements in Culin Park. There was to be 1 year of preparation and 1 year of physical works. That process has paused for a while, and there have been 2 external reports or reviews. The first by Max Peterson, and you've all received that report and you've had a chance to consider that. The second review was by the New Zealand Parks Agency's Managers Group that looked at 2 aspects. The first aspect it looked to was the design that was prepared by staff and the community, and also it looked at an alternate design which was put forward by some of the neighbours. The report seeks an additional budget of $1 million. The entire project, apart from the roading and renewals, is funded from historic DCs. There is no additional loan or debt repayment required if this funding is agreed by the elected members. And that's to cover the costs that are outside of the prepared tender. I'd like to introduce the team who will discuss the paper with you. We'll take the paper as read, but we've got Doug here, the new team leader at Public Spaces. Doug has recently joined the Spaces and Places team and has prepared this paper here. I'd also like to introduce Jeff Cannon and Rebecca Ryder from the New Zealand Parks Agency's Managers Group, who will talk through their design review. They're over there, and Doug and I will vacate the chair after the PowerPoint, and they will speak, and then we'll come back. So I'll pass you over to Doug.
Thank you. The presentation I've got here will only take about 10 minutes. It's just to remind everyone of the timeline that we've followed to get to the point we are today. And then we'll hand over to Jeff and Rebecca to outline the recommendations in their review. So that timeline there, just the critical aspects as to why the project paused after it was initiated in 2017. We did do 2 rounds of community consultation. In December 2017, there was a picnic in the park public event. I'll show you some photos of that soon. And then following that, there was the first concept design brought to the community in April 2018, and that included an open day at the park as well. The final design was put to construction tender in August 2018 and then awarded with a reduction of the scope due to budget limitations in December. And then the project was put on pause before physical work commenced, and that was mostly with the Max Peterson review of 4 council projects being initiated, and this being one of them. And so you'll remember in April 2019, the Max Peterson review findings were presented to council, and that was also when we received the NZ Parks review findings as well. And so then here we are, June 2019, at this committee, looking to reignite the project and asking for more money. So the Max Peterson review findings, it found that it was really initiated on the basis that there was communication to council that the community weren't happy with the where the project was going. So he really looked at the process and the consultation that happened around the project. It wasn't a review of the design per se, it was more the process involved. He found that the engagement plan was sound, that was intended to be followed, but the 3rd round of consultation didn't happen prior to the tender being put out for the project. The engagement that did happen, which was on-site, open day kind of interactions with the community, was considered to be current best practice in Mr. Pedersen's view of this type of project. And he did note that the community was generally supportive, in the region of 70% supportive of the concept design at the open day. But the critical flaw was that the third round of consultation didn't happen, that we had undertaken to do. So I'm just going to outline the physical works that have been completed to date. There has been a separate seawall reinstatement that has happened, and also beach replenishment. So just some quick images of what's happened here. That was, of course, the massive storm that you probably remember, storm surge, and it absolutely obliterated the seawall. Obviously needed work to fix that. And the beach, I haven't gone way out into the harbour and taken a picture of this. This is quite close to the, I don't take this picture actually, but you see that it could benefit from sand replenishment as a nice swimming beach. So that happened recently. Essentially the seawall was just upwards of 200k for that work, and this was 100k of an annual budget. That's 100k. All of it was spent in Coolan Park in the past year to replenish the beach. And that's all that work happening, and now it looks great. There's a seawall on the left. There's the boardwalk out to the concreted groin that goes out, and looking back from that to the beach. So community consultation, there was the picnic in the park event, as I said, the community open day, and also a cultural values assessment, which is the first appendix attached to the agenda. It's definitely worth a read because this is a very significant site in terms of being one of the most populated sites for Mana Whenua for hundreds of years, but also a very significant site post-contact with squatting activities post the Pukahinahina event. And it's really important to get the idea of the function this park has had for hundreds of years and the opportunities there are to reflect that function and how the park is treated in this redevelopment. So there's the picnic in the park event, closed for vehicle entry for that day, and some fun stuff to do. People were invited to give their views on what they wanted from the park. This wasn't reviewing a plan, this was saying, what do you enjoy doing here? What do you want to see in any redevelopment work protected or enhanced? Coffee and food, hot chips, great. And then the second event was an open day in April last year, and that's where a concept plan was presented and the results of the first engagement fed back to the community. And this was the first concept plan, and principal elements of that were moving the car parking to the back of the site next to the railway and making the balance of the site freely available for pedestrians, cyclists, not to be conflicting with the cars, and a series of other elements I won't go into the detail of, but I will just outline the three top items of feedback from the community. By far the biggest one, which had twice as much responses as the next biggest issue, was restrict car access around the park. So this just shows the concept of moving that parking to the headland and to the back of the park, and removing vehicle access, free vehicle access right through the middle, as is currently the configuration, which you can see there, parking and the vehicle access through the middle. The concept is more to get rid of those cars and that vehicle access and make it a place for people instead. And this is the area where the parking is proposed to go, at the back next to the railway, and a car parked approximately where parks would be, with the road being at the back. So the second biggest piece of feedback was sea lettuce control, funnily enough. Apparently sea lettuce is awful when it kind of gets out of hand and creates an odour. So this is just showing that the design does include that hard stand area for collecting that and drying it out before removing it from the site. It's pretty straightforward. But drainage issues are huge as well. That was the third most popular piece of feedback from the community. You can see the drainage doesn't always work. And so obviously the redevelopment's trying to address that as well, including changing the levels of the site, but also using rain gardens and such. So now I just want to briefly go over the iteration of the design so you can understand how that happened. You had the first concept design that was shown to the open day. After that open day, the concept design was changed to increase car park numbers based on the project team feedback to the design team and also feedback from the community. The car park was redesigned to avoid some of the mature pohutukawa and the need to remove branches from those. Redesigned the site entrance to make it more legible, safer for vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists. And also more parking was provided on the headland to allow people to park right up to the edge of the headland and enjoy the coastal environment and the views from their cars. And this was the adjusted design that actually went out to tender, and including those elements I just described. Then it's important to note what elements were removed or altered from the scope to meet the budget. So once the tender went out and we got the responses, the preferred tenderer went through a process of revising the design because it came in over $500,000 more than what the budget available was. And so there was a process of looking at elements to take out so that the project was deliverable. And those things that were taken out included planting, included the seating and facilities, and some structures. And just to give you an idea of what some of those seating and structure elements were, this was bespoke seating design provided from the consultants. It was, obviously there was a lot of seating. We're talking kind of $250,000 worth of seating and other elements that was taken out of the scope. So the bespoke design kind of reflects some of the Waka landing references made in the cultural values assessment. So losing those elements does have a relationship to how much we're observing the cultural values provided in the assessment. The barbecue facilities, people did tell us that picnicking and using the park for barbecues and such was really important, and also reflects the function of the space, of how it's been used for a long time. So taking those elements out in terms of replacing the existing facilities, putting new roofing structures and more facilities in, that was delayed as well. And also some of the structural elements and also interpretive signage and such. The way this was reflected on the concept design, as you'll see in the 2019 version, which is available on our website, it basically refers to a lot of those elements I just described there as potential future elements. So it's saying we're not delivering them now as per the tender that's been awarded, but rather saying those things could come along in the future. So just to bring you completely up to speed, the issue is now that we're saying, well, we didn't go through consultation on these reduced scope or revised designs. And if we go back to people and have said before, well, here's all the elements you wanted, like facilities to help with picnicking and using the site for what you want, this third round of consultation should be open to saying, well, are those elements included or not? If they were to be included, it is necessary that there is more budget available to look at that option. And it's also the case that we've got the New Zealand Parks Review, which makes recommendations as to both re-inclusion of elements, but new elements that they have identified that could improve the design. And so the budget increase is looking at giving scope to have the full concept that was presented to the community on the table again in the third round of consultation. But it's also looking to make sure that we're taking on board the lessons from the Max Peterson reviews in Durham Street about making sure that the budget available accounts for things like non-tender costs and contingencies and risk funding, so that we're actually going out there and not setting ourselves up for an overspend on delivering a project. Yeah. Okay, so that's okay for now. I'll hand over to Jeff Canham and Rebecca Ryder to go through the recommendations from their review, and then we could return for questions later.
Welcome, Jeff and Rebecca. Just if you press your button on your microphone, Jeff, so we can hear you as well, that would be great.
Tēnā koutou. Yes, my name's Jeff Canham and I'm accompanied by Rebecca Ryder. The New Zealand Parks Agencies Managers Group, big word, is a peak professional body of parks managers and others in our sector. It actually represents about $500 million of annual expenditure per annum by parks agencies, mostly councils, and including DOC. You've probably read the report, but you'll see that we've brought together some experts to undertake this work independently as a review of TCC's project, featuring 3 Parks Agency managers, Rebecca as a senior principal landscape planner with Boffa Miskell, and from predominantly city councils who have similar portfolios and projects of this scale. We've managed to chunk down our review to a summary, and as such we've noted a few key points that we'll share now. We found that TCC have delivered an above average practice to date with some improvements suggested for the future. We had a range of interviews, and one of those was with staff who indicated they're already planning those improvements to occur. The on-the-ground improvements proposed for Coolin Park we believe are consistent with best practice design and in the majority represented the public's view that TCC gathered. Our panel supports the approach and commends staff on a well-designed and well-resourced consultation, certainly very well-resourced, noting this was nearly undertaken in full from commitments made when consulting with the public. Our panel also supported the work by the other independent review, and we felt that we could completely support those findings. In seeking greater data confidence and implementation costs, we noted staff gave the impression that consultation or a stage of it was omitted, when in fact they were gauging market costs and contractor availability to return to a stage of public discussion. While this should have been formally communicated, there's still the opportunity to do that, and we noticed that that is being part now of the project program, and staff suggesting this project continue. Just some high points for you. Some general observations were that we felt that the consultation was actually exemplary. It was certainly a very large investment in this stage of a project, and TCC certainly lead the way in resourcing things to that extent. That said, relationships were important to those people that were spoken to, and that might be the shift and the methodology that continues from this point. And we note that Council should actually finish its committed consultation planning process and engage with the community on the yet-to-be-completed design. The residents were pretty animated about parking, and that's not uncommon. I think leaders shouldn't be put off by the degree of connection that people have with where they put their car. That said, we've identified that this project should have a longer-term goal of cars potentially being removed altogether as these parks become more and more prominent as part of people's recreation behaviours. We did note that the project to date has been heavily process-driven, and there is a need not to lose focus on the environmental and ecological values of the site. Just skipping to some top points, if you like, and then I'll pass over to Rebecca. We did believe that in its current neighbourhood category, the park could be recategorised more appropriately for its purpose and to reflect the current and future use. So that is, it would become a destination category park. That's following the New Zealand standards for such. Many of us know that Coolin Park, perhaps over the last 30 to 40 years, has dramatically changed. It is now more of a thoroughfare for cyclists and walkers on your very popular coastal foreshore walk, and it's not necessarily just about terminating a car journey there. The other thing that TCC have touched on really well is the cultural integrity and connection with tangata whenua, heritage and values of that site, and we've identified that as a huge area for greater connection with Ngāi Tamarāwaho. We believe that resolving the car interaction with people and putting people first ahead of vehicles will be one of your key success factors. That said, let's get beyond vehicles. There's a large park there that currently is dominated by poor design, and we believe that the rationalisation of play equipment for old and young, including the use of the mound and natural play areas, will be really important in your design, and as you're doing, the need to reinforce the harbour connection for park users.
To just further elaborate on a couple of those points, just covering off the completeness around the iwi advisory that was sought through that process, through the consultation process, and as raised by Doug, around some of the elements which have been removed in the rationalisation of budget. The Mana Whenua and Waka interpretation opportunity has quite a significant project value to this park, and it also shares a vision that needs to be connected into the design. And we feel that, and we highlighted this through the review, that this ranges from all the way through for the discussion around 1,000 waka being the historical reference to 1,000 waka being parked on the beach or berthed on the beach. In the design itself, we didn't critique elements of the design with our own preference. We looked at best practice approach. And out of that, there were just some things that we picked up around just ensuring that if we are to bring those elements through, that we recognise what components in the design are inherently important to the cultural and tangata whenua values. And another element is just making sure that you heed and go back to tangata whenua, or in this instance Ngā Tamara Wāho, to look at what the tikanga is around the design of those elements. Some of the seats themselves were orientated in what would be considered the wrong orientation. Waka inherently do not sit bow first on a beach, as it's so that's something that needs to be considered in the design process. So we've made that recommendation to go back and undertake further engagement with iwi, or in this instance Ngā Tamara Wāho. The other component around sort of the key moves that we thought could assist the design brief was bringing the cultural dimension through. In the design report, it talks about key moves, the design key moves, and the cultural dimension doesn't come forth very strongly in that, and we feel that that is perhaps a missed opportunity here, and inherently could be brought through right to the front component of what is underpinning the design of this park. The other aspects around the fear of visibility or vehicle dominance are likely to be allayed by the outcome where vehicles are less visible, as an outcome of the design placing temporary vehicle storage and flow at the southern end or the hedge boundary of the reserve to test that. And also the concern around the proximity of the operational rail corridor by some submitters is believed to be resolved by the design locating parking next to this boundary, as opposed to picnics and picnic tables and seating. The experience of trains moving through that space was raised by that submitter. However, our observations, both from our site visit and through the design process, observing the design and reviewing that, was it would be less preferential to have picnic tables and seating adjacent to the rail corridor as it would be to have vehicle parking space.
Thanks, Rebecca. And we introduced a section around opportunities in the short term. Most of this validates some of the, I think, in the community consultation, which was exemplary, and the fact that you've got abundant capacity and capability to lead some key points. So the Parks and Reserves Department, we believe, the panel believes that it should be the lead on the projects where they relate to parks to ensure the institutional knowledge, not just from parks but from the community process, is not lost. We noted that your new roles for community engagement need to be in place, and I think they've progressed since the review in March. And again, that forms that relationship with the community. With that comes trust from a process, and it's not just project related. We noted that as a matter of priority. We believe that as soon as possible the project should be restarted, given you've got a social licence to operate from your abundant process, and there was a real appetite to see some of those changes take place. We made a series of technical points around best practice, and they're contained within the report, including ensuring existing trees are protected and a succession plan is in place to protect the values of the park. So those things are intrinsic to the design you come to. Longer term, again, we came back to a recognition of how it's used. So the recreation assessment side of people using that park predominantly as a walking and cycling terminus to their experience going through. And noting that the future of the park is actually probably one without vehicles. And that's a reflection from this group of people on the screen who participated as volunteers, so they're parks managers who have skin in the game. This is a very popular thing for us to do, but it's where we've taken all that experience from city councils who reflected on site that Tauranga is conspicuously morphing into that more city type place where the values and the people who are coming here expect those sites to be a little bit more modern and so forth. We were then asked to participate in some supplementary work as well, so if there's time through the chair, we'll speak to that as well. So a supplementary drawing was submitted after our review, so the panel was asked to comment on that. That primarily seemed to return to car parking again. Those things never go away. So there's an extra document that is in your agenda that we'll speak to now.
Pages 148 and 149. These are the two on the back of your report, Jeff, is that correct?
On
Pages
the agenda, pages 147.
148, 149 on ours.
Yep.
Thank you.
And the review of that sits on the preceding page at 145.
So I'll pass over to Rebecca, but we felt that the images appeared to redesign Coolan Park as primarily a park in its current form, and again with a focus towards car parking. So the absence of people being at the heart of it was conspicuous. We felt the design worked against the best practice principles for open space design and neighbourhood reserves and reinforced the bisecting role of that central vehicle road currently in the park.
So turning to what is titled Appendix 4 on page 145 of the agenda, the images that the key matters that we did look, and Jeff has just covered that off, is looking at the recreation experience and safety of park visitors and the primary purpose of Coolan Park as a neighbourhood reserve. We felt would be adversely affected by the levels of vehicle dominance proposed by the supplementary design. The vehicle storage shown and suggested environmental interventions could achieve it would dissect the park into two main zones and restricting the multifunctional use of the open space, connections of open space, and inhibit safe pedestrian movement through the park. The design in the review by the panel felt that it moved against current best practices and design principles, particularly in the landscape architectural field, which I myself am experienced in, and current best practice for open space, reserve open space design, particularly where a waterfront open space is dominated by pedestrian-orientated space. So the other aspects that we looked at around the design vernacular, aside from the extent of the vehicle storage shown, the design vernacular was more inclined toward an older-fashioned vehicular design or vehicular-focused approach than what is worldwide mostly being undone, to lessen the environmental impact and to honour the foreshore locations such as Coolan Park. The drawing provided encapsulated all the issues currently not working at Coolan Park, but contributes to none of the benefits for any investment, such as making the park visit better and safer for people. It reinforced the dissection of the open space into three areas: foreshore, midshore and rear of the park, resulting in disassociation of open space to the waterfront. The design moves elsewhere in the city, including Pilot Bay, have moved to avoid pedestrian movement along the immediate shoreline, and the design the design that was provided represented the option most opposite to the public sentiment and would appear to have had the greatest impact to local residents. I think there's other aspects in there in relation to that particular proposal and how that didn't necessarily grasp the stormwater challenges that are occurring on the site and you've observed in the photographs. And it seemed to be solely based on saving the current central roadway and expanding upon it. In the drawing, removing one of the existing paved surfaces, i.e. the proposed the short concrete path that connects the pedestrian and cyclist to the current sealed roadway. That's one of the aspects that they did do. This has probably been the best investment in the park in the past 15 years and opposes what's already happened at the park for those pedestrians and cyclists transiting through Coolum Park as part of a longer and now very popular recreation ride, as we've referred to before. I don't think I need to go on any further than that, other than we've provided you an analysis and a review of the alternative design provided, and compared that against the other the best practice reserve open space design and landscape architectural best practice design principles that we applied in the review for the Coolum Park proposed design.
Thanks, Rebecca. I think one of the final comments from the panel was noting that Tauranga City Council has probably few of these parks next to the foreshore, and that this was, where the panel could feel the responsibility from the project and the desire from the public to make sure that it's honoured and special things happen there. So when it was looking for similar examples, it went round the harbour edge and kept coming back to this one, obviously being very special to people. Thank you.
Thank you. So, councillors, any questions for Jeff and Rebecca in the first instance, and then we will go back to staff. So we have Councillor Stewart. We'll go around the circle. We'll start this side and we'll come round.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair to Jeff, what you were saying made sense until you said about the cars being removed altogether. I'm very familiar with that park. Parents come with young children, elderly come there to enjoy the view. So what would happen if we got rid of all the cars altogether? I don't see how people, it seems to me the people component's being left out of the design principles. So if we removed the cars altogether, how would people enjoy that area, given that it's a little narrow street that leads on to the park? Can you help me with that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Sorry, the panel report notes that your design still includes car parking towards the back of the reserve, as we call it, close to the railway line. So it's not removing it altogether. The comment about there being no car parking or vehicle storage in the long term, it's more about the longer term view that maybe in council's planning it might need to do things a bit more 21st century. And that is, you've still got a district plan that requires car parking on parks, and that goes against world practice. So that puts you in the 19th century nearly. So there's funny things like that in the long term you might look at. But no, this panel report isn't suggesting the removal altogether. It's just saying the long term that'll become an issue probably. In the short term, I think what we supported though is your current indicative car parking towards the railway line where the hedge shields it from the properties above.
You believe that's the best place for the cars, by the hedge, by the rail?
It's the least obtrusive, and it probably deals with making it the most people-friendly park in the way that we've summarised the three zones through Rebecca's comment as well.
And Madam Chair, I've just got a question through you to the staff, if that's all right. Just regarding the historic development contributions, was that mentioned in our other reports, or is this something you've discovered since?
Mark, we can come back to that. We'll just do questions first. Sorry, we'll do questions for these guys first. We'll come back to that because it's quite a large topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff and Rebecca, it's following on a little from Councillor Stewart's comments that I think, Jeff, you said that this park could be elevated in its status, as a, not regional, but more than just a local park. And in the context of the world experience, we are a very different city. People can't get there apart at the moment from motor vehicles. So if we were to see a park in the future that didn't have vehicles in there, we would have to have a much better public transport system than we do now. And I think some of your comparison to the overseas experiences is where they do have already. I'm particularly concerned about disabled access to the place and the disabled enjoyment of the waterfront part, which is available currently. it could be made available on the adjacent road reserves. And I wonder if you would comment on that, because, you know, there's heaps in Beach Road, there's heaps on the other side, whereby there's a road going right along the coast, trees and so on, where people could go and park there and enjoy their lunch, which they like to do, instead of going into the park. Do you think council should look at the development of those areas as well as a way of solving this problem and not trying to put it all into the park? Long question, but I think you get my gist.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's a good question. The calculation I keep coming back to, and I was just trying to work it out before, I think of your total land area in Tauranga, about 20-something% of it is roading. So that's public land that you've already sealed and cared for. But you're right, I think that people that are looking for a takeaway meal in the car experience could probably still go down to many of the roads that give them the view and maybe some shelter from the elements. I think what we saw from the public consultation was more of a park values discussion about play, social imperatives, connection with water, safe swimming, all these sorts of things, a place to take Mum on Mother's Day, was your overwhelming feedback from great consultation, more than somewhere to park the car and sit in it. So that's a great train of thought in terms of the other opportunities. Coolum Park shouldn't have to do all of it, and I think your process has borne out a great social licence to operate for what you invest in there to follow.
Councillor Robson.
With your indulgence, Madam Chair, a couple of questions. Talking about things not of the 21st century, you made no comments about shared pathways, yet my understanding is most civilised countries recognise the danger they pose, particularly to pedestrians. They are not a 21st century solution. Have you got any suggestions as to what we should be doing in that space?
That's a really good question too. I think what we're seeing more and more is that people and communities are determining some of the values that are effectively being passed to the designer to just do. I think we see that more and more, worldwide we are. In terms of shared pathways, I think the tolerance or the shift in the public is the bit that we need to be mindful of. There is more appetite for shared pathways, but far more appetite by communities to feel they've had a hand on what that means and looks like. So you might find that the one-size-fits-all isn't what we're seeing around the traps. So it may well be that the people surrounding Coolum Park, the intercept surveys you may do at that park, might actually say things that you may not expect. So for example, there's some shared pathway examples I can think of where it's actually not necessarily much about bikes. People would rather bikes be almost a secondary level of use, and then the active management kicks in after that for signage and the way it's managed with park rangers and so forth. But that's all the rage. I think to take Councillor Baldock's question as well, most places are managing this sort of thing via exceptions. So policy with exceptions allowing for disabled access, types of use, hours of use. And if you take a park like Cornwall Park in Auckland, they're looking to phase in vehicle removal over time so that the public can come with that or determine the thresholds for change.
If I may, Baldridge, I'm struggling with your use of the word exemplary. When I go through Baldridge and there's a traffic light system and we have red on collection of data and information, we have red on involvement of contribution, we have red on health, safety and well-being, we have red on customer perception of value, we have red, I think somewhere down the line here, on sustainability, which is a passion of mine, and we have red on management and improvement of processes. I struggle to see how so many red scores under Baldridge, which is just another framework, and you pay your $30 and you can download the model and pretend you're an expert or start a consultancy or whatever one wants to do. But how can so much red be compatible with the use of the word exemplary? Because I thought one of the reasons we're here is it wasn't, and it hasn't been, and we need to improve, and that's certainly what we got from Max Peterson. So it's just the use of that word. I'd hate that to be in a headline somewhere and take the pressure off us improving, but perhaps you can explain it to me.
I'm not really answering a question, but I think the Baldridge criteria is the one that we're using internationally. The brief is important for this because the panel looked at process and didn't necessarily have a brief to go through design in detail. But we felt in process there was some red flag items that we used the interview process to feel better about. I think the outcome of that was that we felt that TCC had done a really good job at the end of it actually. But overall there might be some things that you might want to learn from our report. So, you might say spoken as a true consultant, but I think as a panel view, it at least gave us an international template that we felt we could put forward as opposed to just a report of opinion.
Further questions? Councillor Mason?
Thanks, Rebecca and Jeff. Jeff, I was interested in your comment about potentially recategorising the park from a neighbourhood park to a destination park. I'm a frequent user of that park, and it seems to me that just over the years, sort of 20 years being in that region, how it's just grown and growing, the numbers, and as somebody's saying, heaps of families and big extended groups and crossing over the roads and all kinds of things. It's just an accident waiting to happen, really. But in relation to the consultation, I wonder if 500 metres is actually big enough for the consultation, and I guess the two things go together. In your opinion, do you think it should be actually widened to be a wider catchment because more people in Otamatai particularly actually using the park as a destination? For example, if you look at the map, it's 500 metres doesn't take you very far. The 3Ks takes you up to Brookfield supermarket and area. And I would have thought that all of those people would be using Coolum Park as a destination park.
It's a very good point. Through you, Madam Chair, I think what we saw from your consultation record was that the sense of pride close to the park was where people said, this is a neighbourhood park, it's our neighbourhood, we should have a greater say, we see this, we use this more often and so forth. And that's very natural. The thing the panel noted though was that in this day and age, people have every form of consultation avenue available to them, and whether it's online or otherwise. But you ran such good public open days that I think your mandate through that process showed that there's people way beyond nearby commenting on what was really important to them. I guess it's also a personal reflection that it was definitely a neighbourhood reserve once, and all the planning reflected that. I think though the area you're sort of getting into is where perhaps council should do a best practice guide for parks that are effectively destination parks and deal with issues where people are coming from greater distances, bringing a vehicle, and what they're coming for in terms of a perceived experience. And where, as far as they're concerned, we live in the neighbourhood of that part of town, and that's a park we love to go to because it's got values like foreshore, safe swimming and so forth. And yet there's still local people who see that as entirely as their daily walk, their neighbourhood reserve. The destination status is a mana thing for the park as well, recognising its values. So the sphere of influence of the park goes way beyond that neighbourhood 500 metres.
May I just pick up a supplementary on that, Madam Chair, if I may?
So Mason, are you finished?
Yeah, I think your comments about it being great consultation worries me a little in that December 2nd initial phase where it was a 2-hour consultation, which is not a very long period of time, would primarily have been locals. And the comments have been made about Greaton and all the stuff that happened there where we didn't consult with the people who drove through the place. The locals were consulted with well, and I think this is a case where we could never have picked up in 2 hours consultation from people who drive there regularly and use the place. So I wonder if you're focusing more on the open day in April, where people turned up and already knew there was something happening, because it didn't seem to me to be a great start for only a 2-hour, and actually it happened to be the same day as the Christmas parade down here, which drew a lot of people down here, I think, too. Can you comment? Did you look at that?
Absolutely, through you, Madam Chair. We looked at the entire process. The panel's reflection was that TCC did a very heavy process-laden approach and invested far more than anybody they could find in terms of a project such as this. We found that was quite an exceptional approach and had greater depth than just the 2-hour open day, of course. I think, if anything, you've almost gone the other way. You've gone through so much process to get to the point of design that the public would almost be thinking, well, when are we actually going to see something happen? So the panel was reflecting that TCC head and shoulders was different than everything they'd been used to. They would never have done comments like that, where they would never have done this much consultation for a park project. This is outstanding, why there's still problems. So as the panel came to identify with where you're at, they had a lot of compliments about how much work you'd done, but also said that you seem to be, this is the panel, seemed to be quite sensitive to anyone that came in at any stage not liking it, and that it wasn't a competition about being liked or you know, there being a consensus through exhaustion, but actually finding a way to lead some outcomes.
So if there's no further questions for Jeff and Rebecca, we'll go through back to staff because we want to talk and ask questions around the DCs and also what is planned for that. If we do proceed to a third consultation, the look and feel of that aligning with what Councillor Baldock just mentioned with open day, etc. So if you can talk us through what you've got planned if we do proceed to a third round of consultation, how it would look. And also Councillor Stewart has a question around historical DCs. Apologies to priority one, we will still be another half hour, Nigel.
So I'll answer the question, through the chair, I'll answer the question about DCs. I'll leave the consultation to Doug. Could you just refresh me on the question, please?
In our agenda on page 14, it talks about additional $1 million from historic development contributions. Was that referred to in our original agenda, or is that just some research you've been doing and found that money since that time?
I don't have the original agenda here, so I can't comment on that, but we have been working closely with finance to make sure there's no additional impact on rates.
Through the chair, if I can just add, the project was funded through historical DCs in the first instance as well. Yeah.
Thank you. May I ask another question, Madam Chair? Through the chair, are the people who spoke to Max Pedersen, were they advised of our meeting today?
Through the chair, is the question whether the local residents that were interviewed by Max Pedersen, I contacted Paul Clark and John Little. Paul Clark, I think, is overseas. John Little is here today. Yeah.
Good, thank you. And I did have another question. Do you intend to approach city partners with the opportunity to do some enhancements and opportunities for them?
The City Partners Programme is a fantastic opportunity for TCC elected members and staff to engage with the community and seek assistance. But what they generally do is provide labour, and sometimes they may use materials, or they'll provide professional services for free. But what they don't do is provide us cost savings on major planned capex infrastructure. So it's we can engage with them, but it's unlikely we'll get much support in this respect.
And just one final question, if I may. The parking on the headland, how many spaces have you currently got allowed for that? I think it's a really important place, you know, for disabled people or elderly people who aren't so mobile to be able to enjoy the vista.
Through the chair, yes, the parking on the headland is one of those things that's been reconfigured through the various iterations of the plan, and it started out as more constrained than the final version, which is relatively open, similar to what's there now actually, for not defined spaces, but the area essentially similar to what's available there now for people to go and park on the grass right up to the coastal edge on the western side is retained in the design. So it's really a it's not creation of hard surface defined parking spaces. It's the area is available for people to come in.
How many
by vehicles.
car parks spaces would there be?
Probably the same as there is now. Not much different. I haven't got a number right here.
If someone could come back, I think that's quite an important thing to know. Thank you.
Councillor Baldock.
Yes, the ward councillors are singing from the same song sheet today. You mentioned earlier, Doug, about the consultation on the open day in April. When I read through the sheets, which are page 40, 41 and so on, I highlighted car parks. You know, it comes up quite a bit. And I see that you are and have responded to some of that. But I like Councillor Stewart, I'd like to see more about the design on that headland, and whether, in fact, even more can be provided there. I wonder, you know, the land to the east. You don't want to turn it all into a big car park, but you can still keep grass with the use of adobe blocks and so on, so that people don't ruin the grass. But until we transition into a city where public transport is really an option, I believe we should try and explore that a bit further in this design, and make it possible for the disabled particularly. You don't want them driving in, parking in a car park, and then having to get all the way to the beach. It's just not ideal. And others who just, you know, cruise in. So that does provide an opportunity. And I think I'd just note that in agreement with Councillor Stewart, really.
Thank you. We'll take those points on board, and we are proposing to do a third round of consultation and refining the design so we can consider that through that. Yeah.
So if you can just briefly talk us through what that open day or community consultation would look like. Should we proceed to that? Councillors, I am mindful that we have Nigel Tutt here from Priority 1 that needs to leave at 11, so if we could just keep this moving. Thank you.
So the final round of consultation, appreciating it, is a third round. The process would firstly involve developing what that final proposal to take to the community would be. That would be contingent on the decision here today as to what budget envelope we're operating within. There would be direct communication with key nearby residents, Mana Whenua and the New Zealand Parks team that you heard from today, just working through what that final draft design to take back to consultation would be. Then actually engaging in the wider consultation. We don't have a defined program around that here today. What we would do is engage with our engagement experts in-house, our communications team, and also the design team who have real skill in this area as well, and make sure that we brought a best practice round to engage with the community again. So redesign, then create a best practice plan and implement it.
Thank you, and councillors would like to be involved in that, particularly our ward councillors, just to understand what that process is and how far we spread the net, and who would be involved in that next stage. So if we can come back to councillors with that, that would be great. Further questions? Councillor Baldock, then Councillor Malloy, Councillor Mason.
I want to raise a procedural matter, Madam Chair. Given your comment then that Nigel's going to leave at 11, I'd happy to move that we, you know, adjourn this discussion, let him speak and come back to it, because once we start debating this resolution, it'll go on a bit.
Councillors are comfortable with that, we'll do that. We can all go, do you want a 5-minute toilet stop, coffee break? No? Okay, so we'll just adjourn this paper, DC 167, for further discussion post. Moving now to councillors on page 151, the Provincial Growth Fund update, DC 146. We have Nigel here to speak to us. Thank you, Nigel, and thank you, councillors, for your indulgence.
Thank you for shuffling that to accommodate that. Sorry, I thought I'd be out here by 11. So you'll see there strategy document, and you might think, what's happening is good old Nigel ambushing me with a strategy thing instead of talking about the Provincial Growth Fund. But the answer to that is no. What I'm just going to do is talk a bit about what we're seeing and what we're doing, and that should hopefully provide more context around what the PGF means and perhaps why things are the way they are. I'm not going to bore you with the detail on stats, but it's interesting to have a look at, particularly as we look at our strategy. So Priority One's recently refreshed its strategy. This is going to be only a few slides of it. It is much more comprehensive than that, but we obviously don't have a lot of time. Generally, you all know the growth side of the economy. That looks good, particularly compared to nearly everywhere in New Zealand. So we're creating a lot of jobs, relatively few unemployed. In fact, the Tauranga stats look slightly better than the Western Bay ones. Business units are growing, and we see building consents growing really well and things like that. The bottom stat is the only negative one there, and I won't touch on that now, but you need to bear that in mind as we look at the next few stats. And John, I don't use GDP per capita because I don't believe it's useful in an economy that has a large amount of people at either end of the productive side, right? So, but your point is taken. And there are some negative bits, right? So high growth, some challenges certainly around the stuff you know about. So housing is a problem, traffic congestion is a problem. The bit that really keeps us up at night is labour shortage, and then we have some productivity challenges as well. These are New Zealand problems, but we get them worse here than anywhere else. And our Māori outcomes lag a little as well. Still a good place for Māori compared to the rest of the country, but they lag, the rest of the population. So, if we look at the interesting stuff, we have a labour problem effectively, so we are creating a lot of jobs, we are going to create a lot more jobs, and our population is ageing at the same time. So if we look at the amount of jobs we reckon we'll create, and the amount of working age population, so effectively people between about 18 and 65, then we're going to have to increase workforce participation massively to keep up with that. I don't think we're going to get there. So that raises some challenges. The issue we tend to see is that most industries are saying, we're doing great, we're going to create a heap of jobs. And that's fine in isolation, but once we get to the point when we have a number of those industries, we say, well, look, this probably doesn't add up. So bear that in mind. Also bear in mind that our mean annual earnings, which is the figure I prefer to look at when we look at productivity or labour productivity, we actually lag quite badly in that. So we're not even halfway up these major New Zealand cities. We don't have the government jobs that Wellington does. That's what pushes their number up. But we also tend to find our sector mix pushes us down a little bit here. So while we are better than anyone else in the country at creating knowledge-intensive jobs, we actually have very few of them comparatively, and we're pretty good also at creating the bottom-end jobs. So that's what kind of drives the shape of that. We also tend to pay slightly lower as well. Some of that is due to seniority of roles. Some of it is due to just historical low pay. Although I don't know any employers that would pay less than Auckland rates and continue to get staff. So I would expect to see that coming up. And then there's this one. This is a chart I've pretty much made up, but it shows what happens when we get earnings, which is the shallow graph, and house prices interacting. So this is our problem, and this is why we have a high growth economy that actually isn't delivering for all of its people. Those with houses obviously don't mind this type of thing. If you're renting though, you've probably seen your rental costs go up lots, and we can't drive wages up fast enough to take that into account. So I won't shy away from the fact that we have some very real challenges in this economy. Yes, we have strong growth, and you always need strong growth, but we have some challenges around how that growth looks, and also, as you know, some infrastructural challenges to keep up. So priority one, strategic direction is twofold. We have to deliver prosperity, which means we essentially are going for a higher value economy with better jobs created at the end of that. And we do that so we can influence household incomes. And our economy must also be sustainable. So that's really growing in an intelligent way, but it's also saying, look, we should have a right to be here as well from a social and environmental point. If you look at how we're viewing things now, it's not quite the wellness budget type stuff, but we are much more inclusive in terms of how we look. So we're definitely not only obsessed with GDP and employment stats. We're very much aware of the community and the environmental side and livability. But you also have to say, as an economic development agency, what can you really influence there that is best? And our role is to get the right sectors in this economy to create high-skilled jobs and then get our own people into those. And if we do that, we can move communities up in terms of their overall prosperity. So that is squarely our objective. And then we do these types of things, right? I'll just point out two parts there. The innovation and the education parts are really important as we seek to drive that higher value economy, right? So currently now we have high growth but relatively low value. We're still seeking to have decent growth, but we want to have higher value, so we have to have innovative companies that are creating more jobs and more of the right ones. And we have to be damn good at education so we can have the right skills for the future and have people coming into the right environment for businesses to hire them and for them to be productive as well. So then you say, well, that's good. Why don't we get any PGF funding? And you have a paper in front of you there. I'm not going to go through all of that. But if you look at what we need to do in this economy, it's very much about increasing value by better sectors, so effectively better export or technology-led companies. We want job creation at above average earnings levels, so you will never see us go out and say we're encouraging stock standard job creation, right? We need to be quite mindful of creating a whole bunch of minimum wage jobs, because employment is not our problem. We can actually, we're 3.8%, I know it said 4.2 on that, Tauranga is 3.8, so it's pretty much employing everyone you can. And we have to build skill levels as well. And the prize in terms of the economic part there, so we've got stakeholder strategies to do a bit of work with us around the Provincial Growth Fund, and they basically said, guys, the PGF's nice, but it's probably not going to deliver you the gains that you would get if you focused on productivity instead. So hence, we're focusing on productivity, sector improvement and creating better jobs. So that is 200 to 400 million per year, obviously going year on year. The PGF, from what we've seen and what we hear and know and are told, tends to do stuff a bit more in deprived communities. As you know, we're not a deprived community here, although I think it's understated the level of deprivation that is here at times. Bearing in mind too that having a good job solves about 3 out of the 8 deprivation measures as well. They fund programs, if you look at the Hawke's Bay stuff they announced last week, for example, a lot of that funding NEETs, so not in employment, educational training, into employment, and basically propping up small towns with what looks like relatively minimum wage jobs, obviously with a few exceptions. That's just not really the stuff that we have. Most of the projects here that create that type of thing have already happened. It doesn't necessarily need government intervention. And we do think we'll get a few things, but they'll be relatively small because mainly we're just not aligned with this stuff. So we shouldn't necessarily feel bad about that. We have asked the government for help around R&D and education and things like that because we think that will actually deliver a higher benefit. I think we'll probably get 20 to 30 million maximum out of this. So if you look at the net economic benefit, it's nowhere near that. So that's kind of where we're at. It's, I must say, a fraught process to deal with. It's very difficult to get a clear steer on exactly what the criteria are. And that seems to change quite a bit. As you know, we have several projects that are in front of them at the moment. So we would hope for, I guess, good outcomes out of that. But hopefully that explains the Provincial Growth Fund, but also look where we're heading and why it's not necessarily not smart to go for the PGF all the time, but it certainly wouldn't deliver the highest value that we could for our effort. Thank you.
Mr. Robson?
Yeah, look, I really appreciate you making the point that Tauranga and the PGF don't align well. Unfortunately for Tauranga, we also don't align with this government's stupidity around transport and housing. And, you know, Tauranga's sort of a bit of an outlier in that sense. But could we flick back to the data slide?
Which one?
The first
table.
one where we had the numbers, a whole pile of good, healthy numbers. And it's just...
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. And I'm looking for some sort of more meat, if you like, from you on this. It seems to me that on the old S-curve, we're behind other people. So we have this fast growth. And we're talking about fast growth, but if we look at our GDP per employee, it's still much lower than the national average. So although we're improving GDP per employee, we've got a fair way to go, even to get the average. Have you got any, sort of advice on people interpreting stuff? I mean, the reason I like, I suppose, GDP per capita is it reminds you of how much carry you have, how many people, and for us, of course, we have a significant part of our population that aren't in this doing well category, yet we rate them and tax them and take money off them, and, we are not a rich centre, and I suppose I'm just looking for how we change that curve and what sort of time frame do you think that's going to take? Because a lot of people are talking about transformation and big changes here and demanding, our neighbours say we should just put the rates up 30% and so do some people in the business community. But of course they forget about all the poverty and the dislocation and the people not making capital gains. What can we do to change that curve fairly?
So firstly on GDP, I don't tend to like to use that because measured at sub-region in New Zealand, it's not great, right? You're effectively using 2013 numbers and then they put a bunch of factors in and at the end of it you say, wow. So they tend to judge it more on employment than they do on capital factors. So that's why I think that's part of the reason why I think that number is actually lower than it probably is.
Okay.
But the point is still the same. Are we a lower value from a GDP perspective than we want to be? Undoubtedly. How do we change that? We simply have to get better jobs. But the key part to that is we have to get the right people into those jobs. What we don't want to do is import talent. And reality is we're going to have to import some talent. But what we don't want to do is import talent into all the awesome jobs and leave our own people in the bottom end ones. So that is where our efforts will go.
Understand. Supplement, if I may, can we do something on getting Tauranga? We flick in this between Western Bay figures and Tauranga figures. And I appreciate, again, the data sets are difficult once you get a bit lower down. There's no one actually producing quality data. But we flick between Western Bay figures, like these are, and then later on we've got Tauranga City figures. And again, that moves the bases. Is it possible to get a consistent?
Oh, sure. So we look at Western Bay District, we look at Tauranga, and we look at combined. What you see here is combined. I can flick you the Tauranga figures, that's fine. We tend to look at it holistic, at sub-regional level, because that's our patch. And it's also pretty hard to divorce, say, the kiwi fruit industry from Tauranga. Yeah. So that's the reason why. Yeah. But I can provide those here. Yeah. Yeah. The GDP side and all of that is actually relatively similar. Where it gets really interesting is in the wellness stats, where Tauranga and Western Bay are quite different, but happy to provide more of them. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Nigel. Look, congratulations, first of all, on the launch of Plant Tech. Missed the actual thing the other day, but that was an initiative that you led, and it's really going to deliver good for the city and for the region. Just your thoughts on rental costs and supply. It seems to me this is something we have to get our heads around. People will not move here if they're going to live in a car, and too many of them are already, whether students or whether workers, and not just kiwi fruit workers. Where would you rank it as something we as a council should perhaps start to focus on? We're talking about land supply, we're talking about always, this issue of affordability, but rental, places for people to move into, whether it's expanding our city plan in regard to existing housing. Comment please on that.
Rental availability is really important, and if we look at the context of that, where we do need more people to move to this region so that people can get a return on capital that they have now. What can you do? I'm just off the hip here. Airbnb, have you done anything about that? That sucks up a large amount of rental properties. That's squarely in your region that you can do something about. And intensification, again, as I understand it, effectively you have a housing market in this region that is broken and not working. The rest of us can only do a little bit about that. You can do a lot in terms of encouraging more intensification, and yes, that might annoy a few people. I think the previous speakers kind of mentioned my thoughts quite well. You'll always get the odd person say that's not good, but you've got to go for the what's good for the whole, and obviously creating more intense housing with cheaper houses that people can rent out at reasonable rates would be something we'd heartily encourage.
Councillor Malloy.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel.
And congratulations on the good work that Priority One has done over the years, but in particular under your watch. I think you do great work, and I think the 5 to 8 year prospects for our city is fantastic, absolutely wonderful. But there's always a bit of a caveat. The ground floor businesses in our CBD are really struggling at the moment. You can see that by, I think we talked about before, 150 business spaces empty, and going through the winter and in the short term while this reconstruction's going on, that potentially could get worse. What, in your opinion, is there anything we can do about that to try and reverse that trend?
So I'm not knowledgeable enough on the cause of those 150 properties, but I do know that properties with a lower earthquake rating aren't tenantable by A-grade tenants. So I would suggest that would be the first place to look. And the other point I would make, well, a few points, but if I look at retail spend in the city centre, it's flat. So the stories of decline of the city centre, I don't quite understand. But accepting, yes, there's a bad look to have properties like that. What I would also say is that I would expect that the increase in the amount of students and the amount of people working in the CBD will change it for the better over the course of time. Yeah, but probably a little bit of a hard period now.
Councillor Robson.
Again, following up with that, the spend stats. Sometimes we get stats that include, for instance, car sales. That's part of, and you look at the spend. So you've got retail properties, ground floor properties in Devonport Road empty, but the car dealership's doing very well on Cameron Road. And we look at our spend stats in the city and we say, look, the spend stats are good. And it's the case of averages and overall figures hiding detail and nuance and granularity. And I suppose that goes back to the original data you showed me. I suppose, are we understanding enough the next level down?
It's pretty hard to understand it by street level. But I take your point in terms of how is the number distorted by a car dealer versus a retailer. Yeah. I don't know. I know overall for the region it's up 8%, so I would expect we have quite a healthy retail spending economy. Somewhere. How much of that goes to car dealers versus kind of clothes shops and stuff, I simply don't know.
Or Tauranga Crossing versus...
I mean, a good chunk of it would be that, yeah. We'll look into more granularity, but I'm not sure we would get it to that level, John.
Thank you.
So do we have any further questions for Nigel or perhaps Christine or Ross? Any further questions?
Happy to move when that's done.
Thank you. Councillor Robson, please turn your microphone off.
Sorry, boss.
Okay, questions? Councillor Carrick? So we have a mover for Councillor Baldock and seconded by Councillor Carrick. To speak to it, Councillor Baldock.
Just briefly, that, and I know this is the season or the term in the training where we could be accused of trying to say nice things about people, but I have had a long association with Priority One since my first election to council in 2001. I think we are well served by the organisation and what they do, and I want to pass that on to you and your staff, Nigel, as you give this report to us today. You always give good answers to questions too. I think it shows that you understand the business you're in, and I think the city benefits greatly in the region.
Thanks, Larry. I think I just want to point out that the compliments are obviously welcome at any time in the term, and they flow well, so thank you.
The Carrick, do you wish to speak to it? Anybody else? Councillor Malloy, then Councillor Mason.
Yeah. Just without repeating it, I want to certainly support Councillor Baldock's remarks.
Councillor Mason.
Yeah, I think one of the thanks, Nigel, and for your leadership with Priority One and the regional local economy. And I guess wanted to say that one of the great things about Priority One that I have seen in the past is the immense amount of engagement with by the members. Not everything. I won't going through this thing, but not everything that can be measured is useful. What everything can be measured. But the amount of involvement by the members and kind of sweat equity or whatever it might be called, into the organisation is actually extraordinary. We whilst we often talk about how much we fund organisations and all the rest of it, there's a huge amount of internal funding by Priority One by the business community, and that's, I think, unique in New Zealand to the extent that that happens.
Councillor Robson?
Yeah, sort of in the spirit. Nigel, you personally, I think, has been a tremendous addition to Priority One. However, I'd still like more from the organisation. I'd like more balance. I think sometimes you get conflicted in the role of informing quality conversation with quality data and talking the city up. And I know you have both a promotion role and an informing role. And it's often, I think, a challenge to get those two right, or to, figure out what audience. So I'd like more quality information that has the promotional side sort of parked quietly, so we can have more informed debate. I would make the point that Larry makes, that you answer questions well and you don't overclaim. Where you don't have knowledge, you're comfortable and confident enough to say so. And I really appreciate that level of honesty from people that sit in this chair. I don't always get it. So personally, thank you for your organisation. Yeah, good, but could we do some more, please? It is important what you give us.
Thanks all for your support and compliments. It's very nice. Just on that, we will be expanding what we do measure this year, particularly. It won't be living standards framework type stuff. This is very difficult to get at local level, but we will be doing much more of that. So our board has been very firm on that. So you will see more of that. Thanks.
Thank you. And just from me, thank you, councillors, for your commentary around Priority One. It's a large chunk of the report, but we're going back to receiving this report. It is around the Provincial Growth Fund, and I do draw media's attention to the summary of issues and understanding why it is that we're not making headlines of receiving a substantial amount of funding from this fund. So with that said, right of reply, Councillor Baldock. Okay, so DC 146 put by Councillor Baldock and seconded by Councillor Carrick. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? And that is carried. Thank you, everyone. We are going to take a quick 10-minute break with the patience of those that are here waiting to find the outcome of the Collins Park report and the TAF report. We'll get to that in 10 minutes. Thank you, councillors. Okay, councillors, thank you everyone for that change of order of business at the last minute. So we are now back onto report DC 167. We have Doug and Mark here, and if there are any questions around the cultural assessment report, Buddy Makairi is now also with us. So back to where we were prior. So the next question was from Councillor Baldock, Malloy and then Mason for DC 167.
I'll have, just give...
Councillor Malloy, can you remember your question prior to the break regarding this report?
Hell no, that's far too long ago.
We'll return to Councillor Baldock, thank you.
Just the discussion before about the elements that were removed to try and get under budget. If we now approve the additional $1 million from DCs, does that bring the barbecue facilities back in? Because it does seem a shame to not have them. And then the other one that was taken out was it all the Walker-styled seating and stuff?
Through the chair, the $1 million sought allows for the full scope that was put out to tender, which does include those elements to be realised and allows for all non-tender costs and contingency risk funding and additional professional services to be covered. So it does allow that full scope to be on the table.
So in terms of those seats that are sort of styled as Walker and the comments made by Rebecca and Buddy, I think that cultural assessment report's one of the best I've read, really. It was very, very good. And the idea that there could be something there that represents Walker, which must be the idea behind the bench seats. The only problem is when they're bow first, you're sitting the wrong way, facing the water. So if somehow we can find a way to incorporate that but get people sitting the right way, it would be really good. More of that feedback through the next round of consultation, won't we? And try
That's the intention.
Try to keep out of the weeds too much of what it may look like and focus on the issue of and the recommendations that are on the table at the moment. So Councillor Mason, your question?
Could I ask about the question asked Jeff earlier on about potentially changing designation from a neighbourhood to a destination reserve? Could I have your opinions on that?
Through the chair, many councils do declare some reserves as a destination. I'm not sure the exact process they use to do that. I suspect it's through the Reserves Act and the Reserves Management Plan. We haven't necessarily done it. The yardstick, which is the Parks national benchmarking tool, which we participate in, does ask us a question about destination reserves or premier reserves, and the only one we currently classify is Memorial Park, because it has multiple activities. It's similar to Culin in some respects, it's Harbourside. The only other one which would almost fall into that categorisation might be Mount Drury. I think it's something we can certainly explore, but I can't give you a definitive answer on the process right now. What I suspect it will be through an amendment to the Reserve Management Plan.
And the second question is, do you think that would be worthwhile expanding the area to be consulted from 500 metres to a larger number?
Just by paying a visit down there on a busy day, you can see how well used it is, and not everybody is a local, clearly, because the locals within 500 metres would walk there, I suspect, or scooter or bicycle. There's a lot of cars in there coming from across the city, outside the city. The boat club users are from all over the place, so expanding the consultation would be a good idea. That also is reflected upon by your previous question about a destination reserve. If we do that, it also gives staff guidance about how we consider our engagement with the community when we're looking at a certain type of reserve. We're already ahead of the game because we understand some key components of what that reserve is anticipated being. So I think this conversation is going the right way. We need to look further into it.
If I could just add to that, this is the third round of consultation we'll be going through, and the exercise of getting the values that people hold for the park has occurred through the first round, and then a concept's been developed to take back to the community. For this third round, we will use the newly minted engagement team and council to say, well, where are we at on a spectrum, and with the different people we engage with in terms of informing all the way through to co-design of the elements of the park. There will be aspects of across that spectrum for this third round. So there'll be partners in co-designing the final elements, but there will also be an element of going out there and saying, here's where we've got through an involved process to date, and we're not going back to square one. It's just important to be upfront that working with the engagement team, that lens will be put on this to say what's the right sizing of consultation for this final phase. I don't want to raise the expectations of going out there to the whole community and starting again, because that's not what's notionally on the table.
Thanks. And the reason why I'm so keen to have expand the area and the number of people engaged with is because I'm one of those. I live in Matua, and my predominant use of the park is I cycle or run through it probably 2 or 3 times a week. And so my experience of it is actually quite different to the neighbourhood. As you say, they walk a scooter there. My specific worry, deep concern, is around all of those modes of transport. So heaps of bikes, walkers, all the rest of it going through, all converging on that where the road turns around, the turning area, together with the big buses and the freedom campers that all go there, creating blind spots, plus all the kids coming for the playground. The vast numbers coming from the elder gym, and various other sort of convergences. People go to the toilet block, all in that area. I'm very surprised that there hasn't been a serious accident. So the quicker we can get the cars away from the traffic lines, all the multimodal traffic lines, the better. So. Yeah.
Thank you. Remembering to try stay out of the weeds in our conversations. Councillor Stewart.
So 3 questions for me through the chair. That park is used extensively by groups of people, young and older, with ball games. So given that we're looking at putting the cars at the back, will you ensure there's a large area for them to have room to kick a ball or throw a ball around? That's one question. Do you want them all and then answer them?
Yeah, of course, we'll receive your comments. Thank you.
And also, are you aware the Matua Residents Association are keen to contribute some public art to this area? They've been talking about it for about 6 years.
Yes, we've been working with Bev Edlin. Staff have provided them with a letter saying we're keen to work with them, and we're keen to hear from them and hear exactly what they're hoping to provide. And it's the entire Matua waterfront.
Right, thank you. And lastly, through the chair to staff, when can we receive a list of historic development contributions that have been collected? What's the time frame for receiving that information?
I believe it's the 25th of June for PSOC.
The historic DCs will have to consider a time and date and come back to you. The 25th of June update that might have included that is being amended. We're working through that at the moment, so I'll have to come back to you.
Just through the chair, on the 25th of June, we're reporting back on the Kesteven purchase, and then with a further update on historical DCs and possible purchases in, I want to say, August 6th, PSOC.
Happy to
Councillor
move,
Couric.
Madam Chair.
Councillor Couric, and then Councillor
Thank
Morris.
you. My question is around procurement, and I'm looking at paragraph 13. So there were some elements removed, but so a final contract was settled on. So now that we're reintroducing new elements via contract variations, and we're adding additional contingency, etc., budget in there, how do you plan on handling that to ensure we get good value? Because I can imagine a contractor will be rubbing their hands together, thinking, "Oh, great, no, this is an opportunity." So, yeah, how do you ensure value moving forward?
The original tender price is in this paper somewhere, roughly 1.7 off the top of my head. We haven't signed a contract because we had to go through this process. So we're at so there's no contract variation, there's no contract signed. We'll go through that process. So basically the original tender is close to the mark.
So Morris, then Councillor Malloy.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Out of the weeds and up into the trees. A bit of a hard segue, but obviously I'm grateful that we're doing this process on a project before the physical work starts. Just in regard to Te Papo Ngā Manu Porotakataka, which of course is completed, and we did the Max Peterson review, will there be an opportunity to consider enhancements to that completed project? Is it currently complete? Have those large trees already been planted? I saw some rather large Putakawa trees the other day, but obviously that project was completed before the new chief executive arrived, and we've got an opportunity here with Coolum Park to do some changes before the project starts. But I'm just asking whether, as a result of the Peterson report, we'll have the opportunity to re-engage with our community and do some enhancements there. We're doing it here. I think we should do it there as well.
Well, if that's the desire of council, we can do that. But I think what you'll find is that the process that we're going through here is something that we may need to do and apply to a range of projects that council are either contemplating or currently involved with. I think the inner city streetscape projects is a good example of perhaps just pausing, revisiting, and then re-engaging our community, understanding what the costs of each of these developments might cost, so we can have that conversation at the same time.
Councillor Malloy and then Councillor Robson.
Yes, through the chair, I'm out of the weeds, I'm above the tree, and I'm up in blue sky thinking, congratulating Mr. Makari on his report. I'd also like to say in the mitigation measures at the back, there's 8 points that I would absolutely support all 8 of them. And yes, hopefully sometime in the future, I don't think I'll get a seconder for it at this point in time, but I certainly hope sometime in the future that this council will consider all 8 of those points, unless I have a seconder to.
Malloy is referring to page 27 of the agenda.
Yep.
Which is page 10 of Buddy Makari's report. So we'll just get some wording around that from Councillor Malloy, because it has been seconded by Councillor Mason. You might want to have some thinking. Councillor Malloy, were you going to put that through? Because Councillor Mason is comfortable to second.
Yeah, I'm happy to move that the mitigation measures, as proposed by.
Madam Chair, I already had indicated I was going to move something, so I believe if I should move that, and then if an amendment comes in to add to it, that would be the appropriate thing.
Second.
Yeah, are you comfortable with that, Councillor Malloy? Okay, so we had one further question from Councillor Robson, then we'll go to the recommendation from Councillor Baldock and seconded by Councillor Stewart. Councillor Robson.
Ironically, it relates to the cultural impact assessment. I just think if we're going to respect culture, we should recognise that Coolum is part of Malaysia, not part of India, is my understanding if one researches it, and they are a long way apart, very, very different cultures, very, very different histories. I think it's important we get facts right.
have a question, Councillor Robson? Okay, so to Councillor Baldock is comfortable to move the recommendation. However, we have already discussed a slight amendment to the wording of B, which is recommend that an additional budget of $1 million from the Historic Developments Contributions Fund be included in the 18-20. So just for clarity, we've put the wording in there around Historic DC's fund because that's quite important fact. So Councillor Malloy, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. Oh, well, I'll move that, and then if there's a seconder.
Seconder.
So speaking to it and noting that addition to B, to make it very clear that this has been a project which was DC funded from the beginning, and we are adding an additional $1 million of DC, historic DC funds to complete it, hopefully with pretty much the substantive items that were there in the beginning, in the design. I drove around there yesterday just to refresh myself about the park and began to think maybe, until this was clarified about the funding really from DCs, maybe this was something we should hold on because the park doesn't look too bad. But the pictures today have reminded me of what it can look like very quickly in heavy rainfall and in heavy vehicle use and so on. And it does need, I think, to carry on to the next round of consultation and enable our design elements to be tweaked here and there and get further feedback from the community. I do thank those members of the community who did raise their concerns about the current design, and you know, I think it's been a useful process to have hit the pause button and gone back and reviewed and recognised we'd missed the stage of consultation, which has been spoken about already. So I think we're on the right track now to complete the project in due course, but I would be cautious about this idea of removing parking, that this is a transition that should occur slowly as the city develops a better transport network, and particularly public transport. Cyclists are dead keen to get their path through it, but I think we need to consider all modes of transport and in this. I appreciate staff response that we will look at the headland and where that can be, we can maybe accommodate some more parking there where those with disability challenges can still enjoy being right on the waterfront for whatever purposes, whether a lunch or just to sit there and to think and enjoy. And I wonder too if we can include the camper van parking, the freedom camping there, because I noted in some of the consultation from the open day they said that there's been a lot of, the place was safer since we allowed freedom camping in the park. So there are some benefits of that. I took some photos yesterday of some vehicles parked there. The most enormous bus I've seen in a long time was parked there, and you know, probably that's an exception. But some of that area on the headland where they could also freedom park overnight would be a real asset. We want to continue to maintain a welcoming mat to those who are travelling through the city, and this is one of the best places, I think, in the city where you can stop overnight and enjoy without any great impact on the park. So we'll see what happens in the consultation when we get through that. Otherwise, I think I'm happy to just move the recommendations as they are there with that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Coolum Park has been neglected for many years. The seawall, that area has been washed away many times. It's been very muddy when it rains a lot, so it's good that we are going to progress it after consulting with the community again. First of all, I'd like to say how great the seawall looks, and the beach replenishment is excellent. So I think the community, they just want practical things that will enhance their enjoyment, and also for the many visitors. It's utilised by the young right through to the elderly, the cycling, the walking, so it's it's a really popular park. I'd put it right up there with the Memorial Park as one of our best parks in Tauranga. The report that Buddy wrote was very good, and I hope that some of the information here can be on interpretive signage, which we don't do enough of in Tauranga around our parks and reserves. So looking forward to seeing that, and also looking forward to accessible parking for those with mobility issues, and also the elderly who love sitting there and just having fish and chips or looking out at the view. And we must provide parking space for those people, and also for families that turn up and play soccer or enjoy the playground that's there, that's highly utilised, unlike the elders' gym, which is sadly not utilised. So I hope we don't spend too much money, I don't know, shifting it around, or maybe out to another area where it's going to be utilised perhaps. But yeah, I think we're on the right track. I was a little hesitant at the amount of the budget. It seems a lot of money, so I hope what we put into that will be there for a long time in the future, and that we can mitigate some of those stormwater matters that occur with heavy downfalls. So yeah, I do support it and look forward to the next round of consultation with the people in that area.
Councillor Morris, then Councillor Clout.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On reading the report, I think that the learning from Te Papo Ngā Manu Porotakataka is that you have to deliver spaces that our community will enjoy, and spaces that are of a level and beautiful enough that they are enjoyable. Those sorts of things make life living, and particularly in the future, as intensification happens over a slow period of time and people have smaller backyards, the outdoor space is what makes living in a city worthwhile. And so if I refer to paragraph 27 on page 13 of the report, it talks about how the learnings from Te Papo Ngā Manu Porotakataka is that reducing deliverables and reducing scope and seeking to reduce elements of a project before coming to council, it can really undermine those goals that the project originally sought to achieve. So I do support the resolution on the table. I do acknowledge that it is DC funded, and I think that is an important consideration. But given that it's in paragraph 27 of the report, and given that we are talking about outdoor spaces in this committee, Madam Chair, I seek your indulgence to include within the scope of this resolution an amendment which reads as follows. It's D. Staff prepare and issues an options paper on re-engaging with the community and enhancing Te Papo Ngā Manu Porotakataka for consideration at a future project services and operations committee.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I think, can I make a point of order? I believe that's off topic, Madam Chair. We could have a ruling on that.
You may finish speaking.
Speaking to the point of order, Madam Chair, it is mentioned within the report that engaging with the community and delivering open spaces is important. It is referenced in paragraph 27 of the report. I am seeking the Chair's ruling on this because it would prevent the lengthy and timely process of producing a notice of motion, which would take up further time than dealing with it today. This is just simply asking for a paper. It is on topic, it is dealing with open space. It is referenced in the report as a project, and I think it would be helpful. If it is ruled out of order, then I am happy to proceed with a notice of motion. However, that will take more time and is a slightly unwieldy process.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. It is a little grey as to whether it can be introduced in this, but speaking to the Chief Executive, he's happy that staff do prepare a report to bring back to the next, probably not the next PSOC, because that's already in, but the one after that for August. They'll bring back to us some issues and options around the discussion that you've just raised and the points you've just raised. So if councillors are comfortable with that, it's not necessary to have a recommendation.
Okay, I just thought it might be appropriate to test it with the elected colleagues to see whether they were of an appetite to revisit it. But if the Chief Executive is happy to provide a paper without even an amendment, I'm happy to withdraw that amendment.
I think the points have been raised, and the Chief Executive happy. If you're happy, as your fellow ward councillor, I'm also happy with that. Okay, so we'll continue on with speaking to the recommendation on the table, and it's Councillor Clout is next, and then Councillor Robson and Mayor Greg Brownless.
Thank you. Back to the matter in hand. About 20 years ago, I lived in Coolum Avenue, and I didn't live in the park, no, I lived in Coolum Avenue, and we had a fantastic, I've got fantastic memories of using that park, playing in the kids' playground particularly. I wasn't playing, I was pushing the swings of my kids. And it is very much an iconic park, I believe, within Tauranga, and I'm very pleased to see that we're investing in upgrading of it. I also recall many winters and even spring where it was very, very boggy, and so it's important that we address those stormwater issues to make it more usable. I'm absolutely committed and support the relocation of the park, of the actual car parks and the vehicle access the road. At the moment, as has often been the case and stated here, is that there's a lot of conflict between the various modes of transport, vehicles, cycles, mobility scooters, etc. Barbecues, I think, are an important addition to this project. I think there was one or two down there at the moment, but I think they can be upgraded, absolutely. And one of the big impacts for me is the fact that this is coming out of DCs. It's not actually going to affect the ratepayer. One of the lessons we've learned over the previous project reviews is that we have to take the community with us, and so a third round of consultation is vital. So look forward to seeing this go ahead.
Councillor Robson and then Mayor Brownless.
Yeah, I want to express some concerns, and I'm just, the narrative here worries me, and I appreciate I wasn't here at the inception of this, but I am concerned about a couple of things, and I just hope that they're recognised in the process going forward. And I just want to pick up the last comment that was just made around DCs. Look, the fact that you find $1 million down the back of the sofa and you've got an immediate need for $1 million doesn't mean that's the best use for the $1 million. And the idea that it doesn't affect ratepayers is not necessarily true, because there may be a project down the line that would have been a better use for that $1 million, but now will have to be funded by the ratepayer. You know, someone's lucked in here, but we need to get away from being lucky and to be well managed, and we're way short of that. I'm also concerned that the project has been developed to a degree in isolation, and people keep referring to parking. And I look at Harbour Drive, which is a great place, and many people actually park on Harbour Drive and get a cracking view of our harbour. And I just wonder whether we're once again focusing too narrowly and not seeing this as part of a network, part of our greater environment, and saying this piece here we should preserve for these people, but these people here can be catered for equally well, perhaps even better, somewhere else. And I don't see that happening. So I'm concerned that this project has been developed like many of our projects in isolation, like the way we do our budgets. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm certainly not comfortable with the shared pathway concept. Speaking, the gentleman's gone, our friend from Park, I think he said Chicago moved beyond shared pathways in 1970, whenever it was. Look, Chicago's not an example, but we know that shared pathways don't work, and I have friends and family who use that park, and they are nervous on that footpath. When the cyclists are coming past, there's no sound, these people are quiet, you've got the e-bike people. This is not sensible, and it doesn't cover off the need to create a safe city. There's a whole lot of questions I have, and I'm not briefed, nor is it my role to provide the answers, but certainly my obligation is to ask the questions in this environment, have those questions recorded, and make sure that they're answered to my satisfaction, or at least to the satisfaction of the majority of councillors before we go ahead. I'm uncomfortable with many aspects of this, but I'm happy to support the motion because the design is coming back to us for our approval, and I think that's where the issue of Te Papa Ona Manu Poratakataka fell down badly. I think somehow the eye of the community wasn't there for whatever reason. But there's a lot of issues for staff to address here. There's bigger pictures for us to sit this in contextually. And this idea, and I come back to where I started, this idea that you find $1 million down the back of the sofa and you have a need for $1 million, I just think we need to be a bit more nuanced in how we talk about money. I've already picked up one comment earlier. There's a theme here that I'm not comfortable with. Support the motion because it's coming back to us. I just hope all these issues are properly addressed in the report that comes back. Thank you.
You've got Councillor Robinson, DC staff writing notes furiously, so I'm sure they'll address your issues. Mayor Browness.
Yep, just three things. The drainage is important, and hopefully that will be able to be resolved. I'm just a bit unsure in my own mind how that will work, given the proximity of the park to sea level and what we're told are rising water tables. So, I mean, let's hope that does work, and it could give us some lessons for other places. We're also fighting that problem. The second one is all I do, or I am aware of, and from personal experience, it's a place where people do take elderly parents who, even to the point where they can no longer get out of a car and they can sit in there and watch what's going on, and they do enjoy that. So I just like to see some opportunity. It doesn't have to be every single space, but some place for those people who are at a stage in their life where they can no longer get out of a car and they can watch and see what's going on. I think that's important. And the third one, with the consultation, I know it doesn't mean agreement, but there are probably going to be 2, maybe 3 different points of view. And if I wondered, by getting those points of view around a table somewhere, we can flush that all out and try and get a situation where we have something that does come as close as possible to pleasing most of the people. So, thank you. Happy to support.
Councillor Mason.
Happy to support as well. Just 3 points in addition to or support of what has been said. As our intensification as the city grows, is that these sort of parks become increasingly important as a backyard to people who who haven't got the opportunity, might live in apartments or medium density dwellings. So it is increasingly important that we do this, and that helps to facilitate the intensification when we have good neighbourhood or destination parks. The second thing is has been made reference to shared modes of transport or the infrastructure around that. On the weekends is probably more of a problem because people are walking and cycling along there, and we, as a city, generally speaking, we do not have good cycling etiquette, and I believe some cyclists can be very dangerous, but also there's a lot of pedestrians who don't like sharing the path as well. So we have to share, and so we as a city we need to improve our sharing and our etiquette around that. But I think in the mornings and in the evenings when that route is going to be used by commuters, cycling commuters, generally speaking, going in one way or the other, it makes it a lot easier to plan for the future. And lastly, I absolutely think the quicker we can get into changing the configuration and moving the parking spaces into one area where it's controlled, and those little kids and people walking through different areas which is happening now, the sooner we can get that done, the better. So happy to support.
Councillor Granger.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Clout, yes, I've used that park many times in the past as well. many, many years ago, but sorry, I wasn't pushing kids on swings. It was a great park it was. It's good to see it is getting attention. For me, simply 2 or 3 things. Car parking is a must. We don't have to make it a gold-plated project, and thank you, Councillor Robson. It is coming back for us to decide, and I'm looking forward to certainly our next consultation with the public.
Thank you. Any further discussions? Councillor Malloy?
Yeah, I'm happy to support. It's an iconic park. It's a bit like Memorial Park. People have been going to Coolum Park from all around Tauranga, from 10, 15, 20 k's out for 20, 30 years or more, 50 years. Not to mention the users of it for the previous 800 odd years. But so, and I'm happy to support. It does need the vehicular access, because people do come from far and wide to get there. The other thing is that, I once again, talking about Buddy Macquarie's mitigation measures, I just want to state that I fully support all those points, 1 to 8. And, I probably would have continued to move it, but I think at this time it would have been divisive. And so I don't want to do that at this stage, but let you know that I personally would support that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Malloy, and I know that staff have taken a lot of notes through this debate, so we look forward to that next step. So any further comments from anybody? Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Baldock and seconded by Councillor Stewart. Councillor Baldock, would you wish to
Yeah,
raise
just quickly, that right now, it will come back to us for final sign-off, and so it would be really interesting to see how the consultation goes. People will have to trade and accept compromise on things. Councillor Robson mentions that there is a problem currently with people feeling safe. There isn't a shared cycleway, walkway, there's a road, and of course that's part of the problem. So when we see the final design, we'll see whether we can address those issues. Secondly, some of the costs are in these rain gardens, which the Mayor mentioned. We are being required to treat stormwater before discharge to the harbour in ways that we never used to. And these rain gardens are not cheap things to do, but they do seem to address it better than a pipe sticking out there. So this is a new test, really. It's the way we get on with it. But look forward to the consultation. I hope we'll be well informed about these open days, so we can get down there as elected members too and listen to what people are saying.
Well, thank you, councillors, for some really good discussion. So I'll put DC 167 Coolum Park redevelopment A to C. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So now we'll move to the very last item of the day, just being mindful of time. So councillors, we move to page 172 of the report, the toxic report on council's annual report on council's use of toxic agrochemicals for vegetation management policy. And I believe we have Anne Parkinson here from TAF who may wish to speak to this as well. Thank you, Nick and Mark.
Tēnā koutou, everyone. I'm Nick Lynch-Watson in the Spaces and Places team. So the annual report on Council's use of toxic agrochemicals for vegetation management policy is what's in front of you. It is a information report, so I'll take it as read and keep it pretty brief. But under this policy, we're required to report to council annually on use of agrochemicals on council maintained land. So there's a relatively brief summary in that report of the usage, the different initiatives we've undertaken, and an appendix which outlines some numbers in terms of those chemicals used. The basic objective of the policy is to gradually reduce our reliance on agrochemicals through a prudent avoidance approach and using alternatives where possible, and balancing that with our need to manage vegetation and deliver a level of service that provides for our natural environment and for our community. We work with TAF, who are the Toxic Agrochemical Advisory Forum, a community group, closely, meet monthly and discuss any issues or opportunities as to our use of agrochemicals and compliance with that policy. Schedule 1 of the policy outlines the, I'm sure you all know this, but the chemicals that we can use, and we can only use those chemicals, and that's reviewed regularly to make sure that what's on that policy reflects what's required and what's best practice in terms of us meeting the objectives of the policy and providing for the community. There are no changes requested at this point to that policy, but that's something that we'll, as we always do, we'll be looking at reviewing and likely updating in next year. Yeah, so that's about all from me. Otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions. TAF will be briefly presenting on their report, which is in Appendix B, after me. So that I'm sure they'll be happy to take any questions on that as well. Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nick. Any questions firstly to Nick or to Mark? Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through the chair, on page 175 of our report, it talks about the hot foam product under chemical alternative trials, and there's also a steam weed control method being used. Have you got any updates on that for us? The steam control method is ongoing, so don't have much there. The hot foam was trialled through one of our contractor, CityCare, who reported generally good results. They're a relatively new provider and are doing some more substantial trials in Wellington at the moment. So we don't have anything further on that, but are awaiting the report that's going to come out of that, which they're happy to share with us as of the Wellington City Council. So at the moment, we're just waiting on that. And just to follow up, if I may, so the next time you report back will be in what, a year's time, or?
Likely a bit sooner than that. The next time we report back is more likely to be an update on Schedule 1 in terms of reviewing that and removing or adding chemicals as best we need to. But there is an annual report is the minimum in terms of when you'll hear from us next.
Thank you.
So a question from me, Nick. How did the team work with other councils to understand what other councils do and don't do, what's worked, what hasn't? Big believer of not reinventing the wheel. So how do you communicate with other councils?
Yep. To be honest, we haven't. It's something we haven't done as best we could, and it's on our agenda in terms of our work with TAF to review that. So that's something that we're looking at doing later this year. We do talk, or I do talk to other, I guess, parks representatives around it when I can, but we're looking to get something a bit more formal in terms of something a bit more structured in terms of understanding that, which we will definitely report back on. Yeah, other than that, we look more to national guidance, I guess, in terms of the use of chemicals.
Thank you. Councillor Clout, then Councillor Mason.
Thanks very much, Nick. Really good report. Can I just make a request for future reports, please? The picture speaks 1,000 words, so if we could have a graph of the total usage year by year, that helps. For the total, but also I think specifically for Roundup, which is the main, the glyphosate product, which people are often honing in on. So it'd be helpful to have a graph for glyphosate and one for the total, just for future. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
That's noted. Councillor Mason?
Yep. Who are the members of TAF? Who do they represent, and is that all of them there? Oh, okay. Sorry, my apologies. Thank you.
Yeah, so most of the members of TAF are there. There's one or two who couldn't make it today, but I'm sure they'll introduce a bit about who they are and how they came about. Thanks.
Okay, any further questions for staff? Okay, so if TAF would like to come up and present to their report, which is Appendix B, page 181 of the agenda. Just have a brief summary and then some questions may come out of that. Thank you, Anne.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Anne Parkinson, and I would like to begin by welcoming 3 new members of TAF. As you can see on the slide, we have Shirley Hampshire, who is sitting to the left there. She's an environmentalist. Casey Davis, a biophysicist and chemist from University of Waikato here in Tauranga, and Lisa Dienmead from Toiho Mai, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. Bill and myself will be familiar faces, as will Kath Tamonchi, who also was unable to be here today.
Just bring the microphone a little closer, please, Shirley. Thank you.
Oops. Sorry, pushing the wrong button here. I just want to get, I've got it back in front, that's what the problem is. That should work, there we go. So, treated seeds have been on TAF's horizon for a while, as they represent a form of agricultural use. They've flown under the radar of Schedule 1, and this year it was agreed that a notice to contractor could be issued, setting out that the use of treated seeds is a form of agrochemical application. The active ingredients of any treated seed must now be approved for use in Schedule 1 of the agricultural policy. Occasionally we get an unauthorised use of an agrochemical, and this comes up on the pivot tables, which are updated each month, and with details of the chemicals used and where they have been used. Mancozeb came up as one of these chemicals this year. On investigation, it was realised that the online database was not aligned with the current Schedule 1, hence the use of Mancozeb. The database has been aligned to amend with the current schedule. One new agrochemical, Oxapro, was approved to the schedule for a one-off use to develop new sports turf at Blake Park and the soon-to-be-developed Ocean Downs. It was agreed to test the soil to monitor the possible movement of the chemical within the soil. The turf development is still underway, and the soil testing is expected to go through into 2020. To date, TAF have not received any other applications for agrochemicals to be added to Schedule 1 for 2019. Signage is an ongoing issue. In 2018, TAF requested Council add additional signage to each reserve sign, specifying whether the reserve is sprayed, glyphosate-free or spray-free. Several ways of additional signage have been investigated, and we are currently waiting on feedback on a web-based option or app. We would also like to inform reserve users of agrochemical use via an app, but unfortunately the feedback for this has been too costly, and it's unlikely that this will go ahead. However, live mapping on the website may be a possibility, and we're still working on this with ICT and NIC. Another request in 2018 was that sprayed active reserves have signage updated to encourage children to wear shoes. This has not been achieved yet. And we are also endeavouring to improve contractor signage. It can be put in the wrong place, can be hard to read, and not contain the right information. This is being followed up with the maintenance team leader, but no changes have been implemented so far. Moving on to Burris Court Reserve, this is a spray-free reserve and it's been a spray-free reserve for several years. We haven't known whether being spray-free is recognised or valued by the community, and a survey has recently been done and we'll be analysing the survey in the next few months. TAF are hoping that by understanding the attitudes of Burris Court residents, a transition can be made away from broadleaf and only hanger weed spraying. This will reduce the possibility of chemical resistance of the weeds being sprayed, reduce the use of chemicals, and support public health. On a similar vein, TAF with TCC and contractors are working on alternatives to agrochemical application, and everyone is keen to explore opportunities and conduct trials to achieve this. We have a work plan. Top of our list is the analysis of the Burris Court Reserve Survey. We want to undertake a review of the chemicals on Schedule 1 and are proposing to review the use of the chemicals currently on the schedule over the past 2 years, cross-registering with the contractors to identify any agrochemicals that can be removed. Signage is still on our list, and we'd like to find out if signage requirements over and above the air plan could be added to the policy. This will be done in conjunction with a policy review. And levels of service. TAF would like to review the levels of service wording in contracts and make recommendations for any changes. The toxic agrochemicals for vegetation management plan policy states, TCC will proactively seek to reduce the use of toxic agrochemicals on council-maintained land. TAF is going to work hard with TCC to make this a reality for the city in the next 12 months and for the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Do we have any questions for either of the two from TAF? Councillor Malloy, then Councillor Stewart.
Anne, thank you very much for that presentation. Looking down at the schedule of chemicals used, I see most of them have reduced the annual use by sort of around 50%. Roundup, for example, or Pregline, it's more than 50%, and most of them have come back. Are you reasonably happy with the progress? I know it's not perfect, but we're heading in the right direction. Are you comfortable with the progress and where we're heading?
But would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, we're happy that we're going in the right direction. We would like to see a much more rapid reduction, and I think the support for the reduced application of agrochemicals generally is gaining momentum throughout New Zealand. There is a lot of conflicting information out there, and if anybody cared to do even just a Google search of agrochemicals, you would find poles apart research recommendations, work that has been done. And it's actually a point which was mentioned earlier of not trying to reinvent the wheel. And it's something which all other councils in New Zealand, we would really like to see a national grouping, forum or whatever of council staff, not just for agrochemicals, it could be used for all sorts of things, but I'm sure Tauranga can learn from other councils and other councils can learn from us. And if we can lead the way on agrochemicals, I think it'll do a lot for us. So yes, we're happy with progress, but we'd like to see a lot more progress.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you.
And also, thank you very much for the work you do. And it is Volunteer Week, so it's even more pertinent to thank your group for the work you do. My question was to do with treated seeds. Can you tell me a bit more about that, please? How common is it? Is it just used for grasses or?
Predominantly it's used for regrassing areas. It's predominantly grass seeds, and you'll often see seeds that have been sown are pink or blue or some other colour. That they are treated seeds. The treatment is to discourage birds from eating them, obviously, and insects, slugs, etc., which is commendable because it saves having to regrass because the seeds have reseed because the seeds have all gone. But it is a chemical, and a lot of those chemicals are not desirable chemicals. The metabolites from those chemicals can cause problems just as much as glyphosate or many other chemicals can cause problems. So yes, it's not just grass seeds, there are other seeds which are treated. And we haven't done a lot of work on determining just exactly which ones, but yes, there are a lot.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, so we'll move on to the recommendation on page 172, which is essentially to receive the report. Moved by Councillor Stewart and seconded by Councillor Clout. Wish to speak to it, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, just reiterate, appreciate the good work that TAF do and have done for many years. And I hope that we can utilise the hot foam product that's referred to on page 175 of our agenda and steam weed control. And going forward to the future, it says that it may result in increased costs, but I believe, how do you weigh up the cost of the community's health versus the extra costs? So I hope that's something we can progress and to reduce the amount of chemicals in the atmosphere, and I think particularly our waterways too. It's easy to forget about the waterways, but so I hope we can do more of that in the future once we know more about the results of the tests and that are going on at the moment. So yeah, just to thank you very much for all you do to highlight this and bring it back to us. Thank you.
Councillor Clout.
Thank you. Just to reiterate our thanks to TAF for the work you do. You are the eyes and ears of the broader community when it comes to these issues. We know there's a real global push to minimise and where possible eliminate the use of toxic agricultural chemicals. I'm very keen to see the results of the Berescourt Reserve survey, because it would be good to see if the community are aware of that and value that. So thanks again.
So from me, I've got 3 action points out of this meeting of staff to further explore ways to work with other councils, which has also been endorsed by TAF. Councillor Clout asked for a graph with total usage per year and also a separate graph for the use of Roundup glyphosate, and also from me the Berescourt Reserve survey data to be reported back to this committee once it has been analysed. So that's some actions for staff. So we have Mayor Brownless and then Councillor Mason.
Yeah, just mention for your information that in Tauranga for the past few years there's been the Robert Anderson Memorial Award in memory of Dr. Robert Anderson, who was a member of International Physicians and Scientists for Peace, and this year it was won in the chamber here by Jodie Brunning from Whakamarama for her research into the effects of agrochemicals, and particularly in relation to children whose body size, of course, is considerably different to adults, and therefore she talked just briefly about that. So just for a matter of information, considering we're discussing this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Well noted. Councillor Mason.
Yeah, just to thank again the members of TAF and also our staff who, I guess our staff have a difficult situation that they've got limited resources, and yet they have to, to provide safe surfaces for for people to use. So it's a balance, a difficult balance to maintain. But Anne, just in particular, and Bill, Anne is a stalwart member of EnviroHub, and is involved in other sustainability organisations. So just thank you to that. I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but it would be really good maybe one day, and I'm sure potentially looking at it, is to have a greater diversity in the group or the other groups that we consult with. You know, to see the young mums and the actual kids and the ones who potentially would be impacted as well. Just a suggestion. But thank you again for your support.
Any further speakers? Right of
Madam Chair. I was just going to add, can we have another action point with the signage, as was suggested, that advice be on there that footwear is recommended on the signage? I think that would be good, because ignorance is bliss, and unless unless there's a warning, then some people wouldn't even think anything of it. So I think that would be really helpful. Yes.
Can we just clarify, are you asking in respect of the signs that go up when it's sprayed, or are you asking us to replace the signs in the city? It's just not clear as to what you're actually asking staff to do here.
Perhaps Bill can clarify that.
Yeah, there's two aspects for signage. One is the permanent signage identifying the reserve and other information. On that, we'd like to see whether it is a designated no spray, glyphosate free, or a sprayed reserve. The other one is contractor signage, which, as Anne briefly mentioned, needs a complete overhaul. The BOP air plan does mention lay down minimum signage requirements, which council contracts mention and insist on being complying with, but we don't believe it is sufficient. The way the signs are displayed, the size of the signs, the information on them, there's a complete revamp needed of what happens on the contractor signs when they have carried out any ag chemical application.
Thank you. So Councillor Stewart would be happy that if we just make a note that staff to work with TAF to improve signage as required.
Right.
Thank you. That gives enough direction. Okay, so we will put this report, moved by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Clout. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? And that's carried. And I will now close the meeting. Thank you, everyone.